The year is 1841. A narrow ribbon of wagon track stretches westward from the Missouri frontier into a continent that seems almost without end. Ahead lies nearly 2,000 miles of prairie, rivers, deserts, and mountains. Every mile asks something from those who dare continue. Some seek rich farmland beneath gentler skies. Others chase stories of hidden opportunity. Before many years pass, countless more will follow whispers of gold buried among California's rivers. Few travelers know exactly what awaits them, yet thousands willingly leave behind familiar homes for a journey that may last half a year or longer. Each sunrise reveals another uncertain horizon. Wheels sink into soft earth, oxen strain beneath heavy loads, dust settles across clothing already stiff from weeks outdoors. Every campfire carries quiet conversations about tomorrow's river crossing or distant mountain pass. Every evening raises another question. What truly happened along this legendary road? How did ordinary families endure such extraordinary distances? And why did this trail become one of the greatest turning points in the history of the American West? Modern historians broadly agree that the California Trail helped reshape migration across North America, connecting distant frontiers with remarkable speed. Researchers at the University of California have often emphasized that the route became far more than a simple road. It evolved into a corridor carrying people, ideas, commerce, ambition, and lasting cultural change. Yet historians still debate exactly how much of Western expansion was driven by opportunity itself and how much by powerful stories that spread faster than reliable information. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Then share your location and your local time in the comments below. It is always fascinating to see where this quiet journey through history reaches across the world. Now, let us begin the journey through history. Your mind drifts toward the edge of the American frontier. Morning arrives slowly across rolling hills where cool mist clings to tall grass. The air smells of damp earth mixed with fresh wood smoke, rising from dozens of cooking fires. Horses stamp their hooves against soft ground while oxen breathe steadily into the chilly dawn. Iron wagon rims creak before the first mile has even begun. Nothing moves quickly here. Even anticipation unfolds at the pace of livestock. You stand among families making final preparations. Some tighten leather harnesses with stiff fingers. Others carefully fold blankets that have protected children through one last comfortable night. A mother quietly counts sacks of flour once again. A father checks each wheel with patient determination, knowing that a single broken spoke hundreds of miles from civilization could become a life-changing disaster. Nearby, someone laughs softly. The sound feels surprisingly ordinary. That may be the first lesson of this remarkable trail. History often appears dramatic when viewed from far away. Yet daily life continues through simple routines. Someone still worries about breakfast. Someone still searches for a missing cooking pot. Someone still wonders whether enough coffee remains for tomorrow morning. You notice paper maps carefully folded inside wooden boxes. Many contain surprisingly little detail beyond rivers and rough directions. Vast portions of the continent remain uncertain to those preparing this expedition. Rumors often travel farther than accurate measurements. Some travelers trust experienced guides, others trust faith. Many trust neither completely. Instead, they trust momentum. If enough wagons continue west together, perhaps the road itself will reveal the next decision. This mixture of confidence and uncertainty defines the early California Trail. Although trading expeditions and explorers have crossed portions of this landscape before, organized emigrant wagon travel remains a relatively recent development. During the early 1840s, each successful journey adds valuable knowledge for those preparing to follow. Every diary becomes another practical handbook. Every returned traveler becomes an informal teacher whose memories may save future lives. The atmosphere feels almost festive despite the risks ahead. Children chase one another between wagons while dogs dart happily through patches of sunlight. Merchants call final prices across crowded streets. Blacksmiths deliver last-minute repairs with rhythmic blows that echo across the settlement. The sharp scent of hot iron briefly replaces the sweeter smell of fresh hay. For a moment, it almost resembles a village fair. Then another wagon rolls away. Soon another follows. The cheerful noise gradually fades beneath steady wooden wheels moving toward open country. You watch familiar buildings shrink behind you until they blend into the horizon. There is no dramatic farewell from history itself. No great trumpet announces departure. Instead, the frontier simply opens wider with every mile. Grass stretches endlessly beneath an immense blue sky. Wind ripples across the prairie like gentle waves across a quiet sea. Meadowlarks call from distant fence posts before even those signs of settlement disappear. The road ahead exists mostly because countless wagons have passed before yours, pressing faint parallel lines into the earth. You begin noticing the rhythm of travel. Walk, pause, adjust a harness, walk again. Hours pass through repetition rather than excitement. Surprisingly, this rhythm comforts you. The trail demands patience long before it demands courage. Historical records consistently describe this gradual adjustment. Many emigrants wrote that the first weeks felt less dangerous than expected, but far more exhausting. Feet became sore despite riding opportunities, because walking beside livestock often proved easier than remaining inside constantly bouncing wagons. Dust settled into every fold of clothing. Meals became simpler. Daily expectations slowly changed. A quiet emotional transition begins almost unnoticed. At first, your thoughts remain fixed upon the home left behind, familiar streets, familiar voices, familiar routines. Gradually, those memories become softer, replaced by practical concerns. Where will fresh water appear? How healthy are the oxen? Is that distant cloud bringing rain? Home does not disappear. It simply grows farther away. Many respected historians have noted that emigrant letters reveal this psychological shift with remarkable clarity. Personal identity slowly transforms during months on the trail. Farmers become navigators, shopkeepers become livestock caretakers, children learn responsibilities rarely expected in settled communities. Survival quietly rearranges ordinary life. Around midday, the prairie grows warmer. Sunlight reflects from wagon covers stretched tightly across wooden frames. Canvas carries the faint smell of rain from previous weeks mixed with fresh linen and dust. You reach beneath one cover to retrieve a tin cup. The metal already feels warm against your hand. Water tastes different outdoors, perhaps because every sip matters. By afternoon, the line of wagons extends across the landscape in both directions. Some families prefer travelling together for safety. Others naturally spread apart according to the pace of their animals. Conversation rises and falls with changing distances. Occasionally someone rides ahead carrying news gathered from travellers returning east. Information becomes precious currency. Stories travel almost as quickly. Not every story proves accurate. Some describe fertile valleys overflowing with opportunity. Others warn about impossible deserts or mountain storms. Certain tales grow larger with every retelling. Human nature changes very little across centuries. Historians continue discussing how these stories influence migration decisions. Some argue that optimistic reports encouraged unrealistic expectations. Others suggest that hopeful narratives gave emigrants the emotional resilience necessary to continue despite genuine hardship. The surviving evidence supports elements of both interpretations. Late afternoon shadows stretch longer across the prairie. Oxen breathe more heavily after another day pulling heavy loads. Wheels leave fresh impressions beside countless older tracks already fading into grass. Behind you, the road slowly disappears almost as quickly as it formed. Only memory remains. Evening approaches with welcome relief. Camp begins forming beside a shallow stream where clean water reflects fading sunlight. Fires soon crackle across the growing settlement. Someone stirs a pot of simple stew while another repairs worn leather straps by lantern light. Smoke rises gently into cooling air, carrying the comforting scent of burning oak. Children become quieter now. Adults speak more softly. The first full day has ended. Many thousands remain. You look west where the sky glows orange before fading into deep blue. Beyond that distant horizon waits everything still unknown. Rivers without bridges, mountains without roads, deserts without shade, fortunes beyond imagination, losses impossible to predict. The journey has barely begun. Already, it has begun changing you. Morning arrives with a chill that settles quietly across the campsite. A thin layer of dew clings to wagon wheels, leather harnesses, and folded blankets. The fire from the previous evening has become a bed of glowing embers beneath pale grey ash. Someone gently stirs the coals with a stick, and within moments a small flame returns, carrying the familiar scent of wood smoke into the cool air. The day begins not with excitement, but with routine. That routine soon becomes your greatest companion. You quickly discover that every successful journey west begins long before the wagons start rolling. Careful preparation determines far more than courage ever can. Strength matters, certainly. Determination matters even more. Yet thoughtful planning often proves the quiet difference between hardship and disaster. You watch families unpack supplies one final time before reorganizing them with surprising precision. Heavy flour barrels rest low inside the wagon, where they help balance the load. Smaller wooden boxes filled with dried beans, coffee, salt, and rice slide into narrow spaces along the sides. Blankets are rolled tightly rather than folded, saving precious room. Every object has its place because wasted space becomes wasted energy for the animals pulling the wagon. Even the smallest decision matters. Nothing feels accidental. Modern historical research consistently emphasizes that emigrant wagons carried far less than popular imagination suggests. Contrary to many dramatic paintings, most travelers brought remarkably few personal possessions. Scholars at Stanford University have noted that experienced guides repeatedly warned emigrants to leave unnecessary furniture behind. Every additional pound increased strain on oxen already expected to travel nearly 2,000 miles. Some families listened, others did not. Those difficult choices often became visible only weeks later. A beautifully crafted rocking chair might seem comforting while preparing to leave home. It feels much less valuable after crossing several muddy rivers. Elegant china appears important in a dining room. It becomes surprisingly unimportant when replacing a broken wagon axle hundreds of miles from the nearest settlement. You notice a father quietly removing books from a wooden chest. He hesitates before placing several volumes beside the road. His daughter watches silently. The books represent years of learning, yet their combined weight threatens the entire expedition. He keeps only one family Bible and a worn notebook for recording the journey. The decision says everything. Hope travels lightly. Nearby, another family debates whether to carry an extra cast iron stove. Several experienced emigrants shake their heads almost immediately. Simple cooking over open fires proves far more practical than hauling heavy metal across mountains and deserts. Advice flows constantly through the camp. Some advice deserves trust, some does not. The challenge lies in knowing the difference. Historical records preserve countless recommendations distributed before departure. Emigrant guidebooks listed flour, bacon, beans, coffee, sugar, salt, spare wagon parts, tools, medicines, and durable clothing among the essential supplies. Yet no printed guide could perfectly predict 6 months of unpredictable weather, changing trail conditions, or unexpected illness. Historians generally agree that these guidebooks reflected genuine experience, although accounts differ regarding their reliability in unfamiliar terrain. Some modern scholars argue that practical knowledge spread more effectively through conversations between returning emigrants than through printed manuals alone. You continue walking through the growing camp. Everywhere, preparation creates its own quiet rhythm. Blacksmiths tighten iron tires around wooden wheels. Harness makers inspect leather straps for hidden cracks. Teamsters examine oxen with careful eyes, searching for swollen joints or signs of fatigue before the journey truly begins. The animals receive almost as much attention as the people. Perhaps they deserve even more. Without healthy oxen, very little moves west. Their broad shoulders carry the hopes of entire families. Unlike horses, oxen travel more slowly, yet they endure difficult conditions with remarkable consistency. They require patience instead of speed, steady care instead of constant encouragement. You reach toward one gentle animal resting beside the wagon. Its warm breath drifts across your hand in the cool morning air. The thick hide feels rough beneath your fingertips. A small bell hanging from its harness produces a soft metallic sound each time it shifts its weight. It feels reassuring, almost peaceful. Children wander nearby collecting smooth stones, feathers, and curious plants. They still view this enormous undertaking as an adventure. Adults smile when watching them, although concern quietly lingers beneath every expression. Parents understand responsibilities that children cannot yet fully grasp. One mother carefully sews another patch onto a wool coat already showing signs of wear. She works patiently, knowing that cold mountain evenings may arrive months from now. Every stitch becomes an investment in the future. Preparation often looks ordinary. Its importance is extraordinary. Around midday, merchants continue selling final necessities. Rope disappears quickly from their shelves. Extra wagon grease becomes surprisingly popular. Tin cups, cooking kettles, nails, spare wagon tongues, and sharpening stones all find eager buyers. Few people purchase luxury items. Practicality now governs every choice. The frontier rewards usefulness above elegance. You notice handwritten lists tucked inside pockets and pinned beneath wagon covers. Some contain inventories of food, others record livestock numbers. A few include names of relatives remaining behind. These simple pieces of paper carry emotional weight far beyond their appearance. A pause settles over your thoughts. What would you choose if every possession had to justify its own weight? The question follows every emigrant preparing for California. Modern historians have frequently observed that preparing for the trail represented an emotional separation as much as a physical one. Families gradually accepted that familiar routines would disappear for months. Ordinary comforts would become distant memories. Daily life would soon revolve around weather, livestock, rivers, and miles travelled rather than clocks or calendars. Time itself changes. Distance becomes the new measurement. Afternoon sunlight grows warmer. Canvas wagon covers glow softly beneath the bright sky. The scent of fresh-cut timber lingers around newly repaired wagons waiting patiently beside the road. Someone tests a wagon wheel by rolling it across packed earth before nodding with quiet satisfaction. Nearby, a physician organizes a modest medical kit. Glass bottles containing simple remedies rest carefully inside padded boxes. Bandages, sewing needles, scissors, and herbal preparations occupy the remaining space. Medical knowledge during this period remains limited, yet preparation still offers hope. Some illnesses can be treated, others cannot. No one truly knows which challenges await beyond the horizon. Several experienced travelers gather younger emigrants beneath the shade of a large oak tree. They explain how to ford rivers, repair broken wheels, ration food, and recognize dangerous weather. Their voices remain calm rather than dramatic. Confidence grows through practical instruction instead of grand speeches. One lesson repeats itself more than any other. Never rush. The trail punishes haste with remarkable consistency. Researchers from Harvard University have highlighted that surviving journals often praise patience above nearly every other virtue. Successful wagon companies usually maintained steady daily progress rather than exhausting themselves with unnecessary speed. A slower pace preserved animals, protected equipment, and reduced costly accidents. Historians continue debating exactly how many miles constituted an ideal day's travel because conditions varied enormously. Flat prairie encouraged longer distances. Rocky terrain demanded caution. Rivers ignored every carefully prepared schedule. Nature always held the final authority. As evening approaches once again, preparations gradually come to an end. Wagons stand ready. Livestock rest quietly after feeding. Cooking fires send gentle ribbons of smoke into the cooling sky. Supper consists of simple bread, salted pork, and hot coffee whose rich aroma spreads through the camp. Conversation grows softer. Tomorrow feels different now. The journey no longer exists only in imagination. You lie beneath a blanket listening to distant horses shifting in their sleep, and the quiet murmur of families sharing final conversations before departure. Above you, countless stars fill the vast western sky. Somewhere beneath that endless darkness waits the road that will test every careful decision made today. Preparation is almost complete. Soon, only the trail itself will decide whether it was enough. The first full caravan begins moving before sunrise. A cool breeze drifts across the Missouri frontier, carrying the mixed scents of damp grass, horse sweat, fresh bread, and fading campfires. Darkness lingers beneath scattered trees while the eastern horizon slowly brightens with soft bands of gold. One wagon creaks forward, then another follows. Before long, hundreds of wooden wheels begin turning together, each rotation carrying another family farther from the world they have always known. The departure feels strangely quiet. No grand ceremony unfolds. No military band marks the occasion. Instead, history advances through the steady rhythm of oxen pulling patiently against heavy yokes. You glance behind one final time. The clustered buildings of Independence remain visible beneath the growing morning light. Chimneys send thin trails of smoke into the cool air. Church steeples rise gently above the rooftops. Storefront signs still catch the first rays of sunlight. These familiar sights appear comforting, almost inviting. Soon they begin shrinking. Every mile makes returning less likely. Independence has earned its reputation honestly. By the early 1840s, it stands among the most important starting points for emigrants heading west. Warehouses overflow with flour, tools, wagons, harnesses, and barrels of preserved food. Blacksmith shops remain busy from dawn until dusk. Merchants understand that nearly every traveller discovers one forgotten necessity before leaving. Modern historians, including scholars associated with the University of Chicago, have emphasized that Independence became a major commercial gateway because of its strategic location near existing trade routes. Yet historians continue debating why certain nearby towns briefly competed for this role before Independence ultimately became the better-known departure point. Geography mattered greatly, but timing, transportation networks, and local investment also played important roles. The road ahead still appears surprisingly modest. It is little more than worn earth. Grass grows along its edges. In places, grass grows through it. The California Trail does not resemble the carefully engineered highways of later centuries. It emerges through repeated use rather than formal construction. Every wagon leaves another set of faint impressions upon the prairie. Every season reshapes portions of the route. Rain fills ruts. Wind scatters loose soil. Tall grasses quietly reclaim abandoned tracks until another caravan passes through. Your pace remains slow. Almost everyone walks. Despite the presence of wagons, many emigrants choose not to ride inside them. The wagons are packed tightly with supplies, leaving little room for comfort. More importantly, walking proves easier on both the animals and the wagon itself. Only the youngest children, the elderly, or those weakened by illness spend much time riding. The wheels never stop creaking. Their sound soon becomes familiar. Leather harnesses stretch gently with every step. Iron rims strike occasional stones hidden beneath packed earth. Chains clink softly beneath the steady breathing of patient oxen. These ordinary sounds gradually replace the conversations and familiar noises of settled towns. Your world changes through sound before scenery. That transformation feels surprisingly gentle. You notice neighbouring wagons maintaining respectful distance from one another. Travelling too closely risks collisions during sudden stops. Remaining too far apart makes communication difficult. The caravan naturally finds its own rhythm, adjusting almost without discussion. Children wave toward one another across the gaps. Dogs race happily between wagons. Adults smile, although concern quietly remains beneath every expression. You begin recognizing faces that only yesterday belonged to strangers. A carpenter from Illinois walks beside his wagon with measured confidence. A widowed mother keeps careful watch over 3 energetic children. 2 brothers from Ohio share responsibility for a team of powerful oxen whose broad shoulders seem perfectly suited to the road ahead. Small communities form naturally. The trail encourages cooperation. One wagon carries extra tools, another carries medical supplies. Someone else possesses years of experience repairing leather harnesses. Skills become shared resources because no single family can prepare for every challenge alone. Historical journals repeatedly describe this growing sense of cooperation. Many wagon companies establish simple agreements before departure regarding travel schedules, camp organization, livestock management, and mutual assistance. Researchers at Yale University have observed that these informal partnerships often determined whether difficult situations became manageable inconveniences or serious crises. Still, complete harmony remains impossible. Minor disagreements appear quickly. One traveller prefers an earlier start each morning. Another argues for longer midday rest. Someone worries that the caravan moves too slowly. Another fears unnecessary haste. Such debates rarely disappear completely, yet practical necessity usually encourages compromise. The trail rewards patience. Pride proves much heavier than any wagon. Late in the morning, the open prairie begins unfolding across every horizon. Gentle hills roll endlessly beneath the vast sky. Wildflowers add scattered patches of colour among tall grasses swaying with the wind. Meadowlarks sing from fence posts that soon disappear entirely, leaving only nature stretching in every direction. The scale feels almost overwhelming. Distance acquires new meaning. You realize how accustomed the human mind becomes to boundaries. Roads, fences, buildings, and cultivated fields quietly organize everyday life. Here, those familiar markers fade away. The landscape offers remarkable freedom. Yet that same openness carries a subtle feeling of vulnerability. A solitary cottonwood tree appears almost monumental. Its shade attracts several wagons during the noon halt. Lunch remains simple. Salted pork, hard bread, dried apples, and coffee satisfy hungry travellers. Tin cups pass from hand to hand while children collect smooth stones beside a shallow creek. The cool water reflects bright clouds drifting slowly overhead. For a few precious moments, everyone rests. Even the oxen seem grateful. Their heavy breathing gradually slows beneath the welcome shade. One elderly traveller unfolds a worn letter received shortly before departure. He reads it silently while the afternoon breeze rustles the paper. The handwriting belongs to family members who chose to remain behind. The words offer encouragement. Though they cannot shorten the road ahead, homesickness arrives quietly. Not dramatically, it settles gently beside hope. Modern historians frequently point to surviving letters as some of the most valuable records from westward migration. They reveal practical concerns alongside deeply personal emotions. Researchers from Columbia University have noted that many emigrants wrote less about grand historical events and more about weather, family, livestock, meals, illness, and everyday perseverance. Those ordinary observations now provide extraordinary insight. Historians still debate how representative these surviving letters truly are. Many belong to literate families with the time and ability to preserve written records. Countless other experiences disappeared without documentation. The historical picture remains rich, yet inevitably incomplete. The afternoon journey resumes beneath warmer sunlight. Dust begins rising more noticeably beneath dozens of wagon wheels. Fine particles settle upon boots, coats, and hats, until nearly every traveller shares the same pale brown appearance. You wipe your face with a damp cloth, only to find another thin layer returning within minutes. Dust becomes a constant companion. No one escapes it. The smell of warm canvas mixes with leather and dry earth. Occasionally, a gentle breeze carries the sweeter scent of crushed prairie grass beneath the wagon wheels. These small changes in the air become surprisingly noticeable after hours of steady travel. Toward evening, the caravan reaches another suitable campsite beside a modest stream lined with willow trees. Camp formation has already become more efficient than during previous nights. Wagons arrange themselves with practiced confidence. Livestock graze nearby under careful supervision. Fires appear one after another across the growing settlement. Routine creates comfort. Comfort creates resilience. While supper cooks, conversation turns towards stories from earlier expeditions. Some travellers speak of broad valleys waiting beyond distant mountains. Others mention difficult river crossings still many weeks away. Experienced voices remain careful not to promise easy success. The road demands respect, always. As darkness settles over the prairie, stars emerge one by one across the immense sky. The familiar constellations appear brighter than ever before, untouched by the lights of distant towns. Somewhere ahead lies thousands of miles of uncertainty. Behind you rests the frontier. Ahead begins the true wilderness. The familiar world has quietly slipped beyond the horizon. Morning light spreads gently across the open plains, revealing a landscape that seems to have no beginning and no end. The prairie glows with soft shades of green and gold as thousands of blades of grass bend together beneath a cool western breeze. The air carries the clean scent of damp soil mixed with fresh wild sage crushed beneath countless wagon wheels. Somewhere in the distance, a meadowlark begins singing before another answers from farther across the valley. The sound lingers, then fades into the wind. Your eyes follow the caravan stretching across the prairie like a slow-moving ribbon. From the first wagon at the front to the last at the rear, the line extends farther than you can easily measure. Every family travels at nearly the same patient pace. Nobody appears hurried anymore. The trail has already taught its first great lesson. Speed rarely wins, steady progress does. The Great Plains possess a quiet power unlike any landscape you have known. They appear peaceful during calm weather, yet they command enormous respect. Gentle hills hide long distances. A cloud resting on the horizon may still be hours away. A small stream on the map may vanish entirely during a dry summer. The land refuses assumptions. It rewards careful observation instead. Historians associated with Princeton University have emphasized that emigrants often underestimated the scale of the Great Plains before beginning the journey. Maps suggested manageable distances, yet written accounts repeatedly describe how enormous the landscape felt in reality. Historians still debate whether early guidebooks unintentionally simplified these distances, or whether travellers naturally struggle to imagine such vast open country before seeing it themselves. As the morning advances, you settle into the familiar rhythm of movement. Boots press softly against packed earth. The steady breathing of oxen rises and falls beside you. Wagon wheels produce their endless wooden song as iron rims roll over dry ground. Creak, step, creak, step again. The rhythm almost becomes music. Your thoughts begin wandering more freely than during the first days. There is surprisingly little urgency. Much of each day's travel unfolds through repetition rather than dramatic events. You discover that long-distance travel requires patience not only from the body, but from the mind. You notice details that would once have escaped your attention. A hawk circles effortlessly high above the prairie. Tiny purple flowers bloom beside the wheel ruts. Small insects rise from tall grass each time the oxen pass. A distant herd of antelope pauses briefly before disappearing over a gentle ridge. Everything feels alive. Even silence carries movement. The Platte River gradually becomes your companion, although it often appears shallow and broad. Its winding course offers one of the most reliable guides across this immense region. Sunlight dances across countless ripples while sandbars divide the flowing water into many narrow channels. The river seems calm. Appearances deceive. Its shifting currents make crossings difficult, while its muddy banks challenge both wagons and livestock. Yet the river also provides life, fresh water, grazing land, fish, and familiar direction all depend upon its presence. Many emigrants come to appreciate the Platte not because it is beautiful, though it certainly can be, but because it offers reassurance. When uncertainty surrounds nearly every decision, following a great river feels comforting. You kneel beside the water during the midday halt. The river feels surprisingly cool against your hands despite the growing warmth of the afternoon. Fine sand slips gently between your fingers before drifting away with the current. Nothing remains still, not even the landscape. Nearby, women rinse cooking pots while children skip smooth stones across the water. Several men inspect wagon wheels, tightening loose fittings before the afternoon march begins. Oxen graze peacefully among thick grasses growing along the riverbank. Simple routines continue. They always will. One elderly traveller quietly sharpens a small pocket knife using a smooth whetstone. The slow scraping sound blends with the rustling reeds and flowing water. Nobody hurries him, on the trail. Careful work almost always proves better than fast work. Researchers from the University of Oxford have noted that surviving emigrant journals frequently describe these ordinary pauses with remarkable affection. The moments spent beside rivers often became treasured memories, because they offered both physical relief and emotional calm after long hours of walking. Still, scholars continue discussing whether later recollections softened the hardships through nostalgia. Some diaries written during the journey describe fatigue far more vividly than memoirs composed decades afterward. Human memory, like any trail, changes with time. The afternoon grows warmer. Dust returns. The fine brown powder settles across every visible surface. It coats boots, blankets, wagon covers, and beards. You brush your sleeve clean only to watch another thin layer appear before the next hour has passed. No one complains very much. Complaining changes nothing. Instead, conversation turns toward practical matters. Someone estimates tomorrow's distance. Another discusses grazing conditions ahead. A young father wonders aloud whether his daughter has fully recovered from yesterday's mild fever. Small concerns dominate life here. Grand ambitions wait patiently. It becomes increasingly clear that reaching California depends upon countless ordinary successes rather than one heroic moment. Every healthy meal matters. Every repaired wheel matters. Every rested animal matters. Survival grows through accumulation. Not through miracles, through persistence. Clouds begin gathering during the late afternoon. At first they appear harmless, drifting lazily above the prairie. Gradually their colour deepens from brilliant white to heavy grey. The wind changes direction almost without warning. You smell rain. Long before it arrives, the first drops strike the dry earth with soft tapping sounds. Dust instantly transforms into dark patches of damp soil. Within minutes, a steady shower spreads across the plains. Wagon covers tighten beneath the weight of falling water, while travellers pull coats more closely around their shoulders. Rain brings relief, then inconvenience. The scent of wet leather fills the air. Canvas absorbs moisture despite careful treatment with protective oils. Boots grow heavier with every step as soft ground begins clinging stubbornly to their soles. Children laugh, adults calculate. They understand that muddy roads can slow tomorrow's progress. The storm passes as quietly as it arrived. Golden sunlight breaks through scattered clouds. illuminating countless tiny drops still clinging to tall grass. A rainbow briefly stretches across the eastern horizon before fading into the evening sky. For a moment, everyone simply watches. Nobody speaks. Nature has already become the greatest storyteller on the trail, as camp forms beside another bend of the Platte River. Damp firewood produces thick curls of fragrant smoke before finally catching flame. Supper cooks more slowly tonight. Warm stew tastes especially comforting after the cool rain. Steam rises gently from every bowl while tired hands cradle warm tin cups filled with coffee. A quiet satisfaction settles across the camp. The day was not easy. It was successful. One young boy carefully marks another day's progress inside a small notebook using a stub of pencil. He counts the days more easily than the miles. His mother smiles softly before closing the journal against the cool evening breeze. The prairie grows darker. Stars gradually replace the fading clouds. Somewhere beyond the western horizon, the plains will eventually give way to higher country, harsher weather, and greater challenges. For now, however, the endless grasslands continue carrying you forward one patient mile at a time. The trail asks for endurance. You're beginning to understand its language. The camp awakens before the sun climbs above the eastern horizon. A faint layer of mist hangs low above the prairie, drifting gently between scattered wagons as though reluctant to leave the sleeping travellers. Somewhere nearby, a kettle begins to whistle over a modest fire. The rich aroma of coffee mingles with the smell of wood smoke and damp canvas left behind by yesterday's rain. Oxen stir quietly, their slow breathing sending pale clouds into the cool morning air. The camp feels almost like a village now, only a village that never stays. Within the first weeks of travel, the scattered collection of families slowly becomes something unexpected. People who had exchanged little more than polite greetings back in Missouri now recognize one another by voice alone. Children know which wagon always carries extra biscuits. Older travelers remember who has the best sewing needles, who can mend broken harnesses, and who never forgets to share news from wagons farther ahead. Trust grows gradually, just like the trail itself. You soon realize that survival depends upon far more than individual determination. A wagon may belong to one family, but the journey belongs to everyone. When a wheel breaks, several neighbors lift the heavy frame together. When livestock wanders during the night, dozens of people spread across the prairie searching before sunrise. No written law demands such cooperation. The trail teaches it naturally. Modern historians frequently point to this remarkable social adaptation. Researchers from Harvard University have observed that surviving journals repeatedly describe how emigrant companies developed informal systems of shared responsibility. At the same time, historians continue debating whether this cooperation reflected necessity alone, or whether frontier culture already encouraged unusually strong community bonds before departure. As breakfast begins, familiar routines quietly unfold across the campsite. One woman kneads dough upon a smooth wooden board balanced across a wagon tailgate. Nearby, strips of bacon hiss gently inside a cast-iron skillet, suspended above glowing coals. Children gather dry twigs while older boys carry buckets of water from a nearby stream. No one appears idle. Every task has value. Even the youngest children discover ways to contribute. A small girl carefully collects buffalo chips from the surrounding prairie, stacking the dried fuel inside a woven basket. Fresh firewood becomes increasingly scarce across open grasslands. So these simple pieces of dried fuel become an essential resource. She performs the work proudly. No one laughs. On the trail, usefulness earns quiet respect regardless of age. The camp gradually fills with familiar sounds. Wooden spoons strike tin bowls, horses shake their manes, causing metal buckles to jingle softly. Someone hums a simple tune while folding blankets still cool from the night air. Another traveller carefully oils a rifle, more to protect the metal from rust than from expectation of danger. The ordinary moments become memorable. Perhaps because they repeat so faithfully, you notice an elderly couple sitting together beside their wagon. The husband carefully repairs a worn leather glove while his wife darns thick wool socks with steady hands. Their conversation remains almost entirely silent, after decades together. Many thoughts require no spoken words. The simple scene feels comforting, almost timeless. Many emigrant diaries describe similar moments. Travellers often remembered quiet companionship more vividly than dramatic incidents. Shared work, familiar routines, and small gestures offered emotional stability in a world where almost everything else continued changing. Historians associated with Yale University have suggested that these domestic routines helped preserve a sense of normal life during months of uncertainty. Yet scholars still discuss whether surviving journals unintentionally emphasize peaceful memories while giving less attention to ordinary disagreements that naturally occurred within crowded wagon companies. Of course, disagreements do exist. They simply rarely last. Late one morning, two men begin debating whether the caravan should continue another few miles before making camp that evening. One believes fresh grazing land lies farther ahead. The other argues that tired oxen deserve earlier rest. Their voices grow firm, never hostile, before long. Several experienced travellers quietly offer practical opinions. The discussion ends without bitterness. Everyone understands that tomorrow's success depends upon today's cooperation. Pride serves little purpose here. Reason carries greater weight. By midday, the sun climbs higher across a cloudless sky. Heat settles gently upon the prairie, bringing with it the sweet scent of warm grass and flowering sagebrush. Tiny insects drift lazily through shimmering air, while distant meadowlarks continue singing as though completely unconcerned with human ambition. You sit beneath the narrow shade cast by a wagon. The relief feels wonderful. Lunch remains modest. Fresh bread baked upon a cast-iron lid accompanies dried fruit and slices of salted pork. A young boy quietly shares part of his apple with an older traveller, whose own supplies have begun running low. Nobody announces the kindness. It simply happens. Such moments appear repeatedly throughout surviving correspondence from the trail. Small acts of generosity often mattered more than grand displays of heroism. Lending a cooking pot, sharing medicine, watching another family's children for an afternoon, or helping repair damaged equipment quietly strengthened entire wagon companies. As afternoon travel resumes, conversation flows easily between neighbouring families. Stories from home become increasingly detailed, as though everyone fears forgetting familiar places. One man describes the apple orchard planted by his grandfather. Another remembers winter evenings beside a stone fireplace in Kentucky. A woman recalls the sound of church bells drifting across her hometown every Sunday morning. Memory becomes another companion, sometimes comforting, sometimes painful. You notice how differently children respond. They speak less about the places left behind and more about what lies ahead. California exists in their imagination as a land filled with endless possibility. Adults carry hope as well, yet their optimism often shares space with quiet uncertainty. Experience changes expectation. Youth still trust tomorrow completely. Toward late afternoon, the wagon company encounters another caravan travelling east. Dust rises between the two long lines before they finally meet along the narrow trail. Faces appear thinner than expected. Clothing shows months of wear. Yet smiles spread quickly as news begins passing from one group to the other. Information becomes priceless. Every conversation matters. The returning travellers describe recent river conditions farther west. They warn about rough sections of road and recommend better campsites along the Platte. They also share encouraging news about successful arrivals in California. Not every rumour proves accurate. Even so, hope grows stronger. Modern historians from Stanford University have emphasized that these chance meetings served as one of the most important sources of practical information along the overland routes. Still, accounts differ regarding how reliably such news reflected actual conditions. Since weather and trail hazards could change dramatically within only a few weeks, evening approaches with familiar predictability. Wagons circle loosely near another stream bordered by tall cottonwood trees. Livestock spreads across fresh grazing land while smoke from newly lit fires rises straight into the calm evening sky. The smell of supper fills the air. Warm bread, bean stew, fresh coffee. Children play one last game before darkness settles. Their laughter drifts across the camp, blending with the quiet crackle of burning wood and the occasional distant call of a night bird. For a moment, the hardships seem very far away. You understand something important now. The California Trail is not merely a road across the continent, it is also a temporary society, built each evening beneath open skies and quietly dismantled every morning before sunrise. Friendships form beside campfires. Wisdom passes from one family to another. Ordinary people become each other's greatest source of strength. Tomorrow the wagons will move again, but tonight, this wandering village feels almost like home. Morning arrives beneath a sky washed clean by cool night air. The prairie stretches quietly toward every horizon, while thin ribbons of mist hover above the nearby river. From a distance, the water appears calm enough to cross without concern. Sunlight reflects gently across its broad surface, turning the slow current into bands of silver and pale blue. Birds skim low above the water before disappearing into the tall reeds growing along the opposite bank. The river looks inviting. It rarely is. You have already walked for many weeks, and the trail has begun revealing its deeper character. Endless miles across grasslands have demanded patience. Daily routines have rewarded discipline. Yet rivers introduce an entirely different challenge. They cannot be negotiated through determination alone. Every crossing demands judgment, preparation, and sometimes a measure of good fortune. A single mistake changes everything. Water forgives very little. The caravan gradually slows as the lead wagons approach the riverbank. Men remove their hats and quietly study the current. Some kneel near the edge, watching floating branches drift downstream to estimate the speed of the water. Others search for shallower sections where gravel bars rise closer to the surface. Nobody rushes forward. Everyone watches carefully. The California Trail contains many important river crossings, each with its own reputation, during different years. Emigrants must negotiate streams ranging from modest creeks to powerful rivers that swell dramatically after heavy rain or spring snowmelt. A crossing considered safe one week may become dangerous the next. Modern historians associated with the University of California have emphasized that river crossings consistently ranked among the greatest hazards recorded in emigrant journals. Interestingly, historians continue debating whether accidents at rivers claimed more lives than dramatic events remembered in popular culture, because many losses resulted from seemingly ordinary circumstances rather than spectacular disasters. The river before you flows steadily. Its surface conceals much. Experienced guides understand this immediately. They ride upstream and downstream, searching for the best approach rather than the shortest one. Gentle slopes matter, firm ground matters, hidden rocks matter, the depth of the water matters most of all. One older guide removes his boots. He steps slowly into the current. Each careful movement tests the riverbed beneath his feet. Water rises from his ankles to his knees before reaching his thighs. He pauses often, feeling for sudden holes carved beneath the surface by months of flowing water. The caravan waits silently. Patience may save lives. After several minutes, the guide returns with encouraging news. The crossing appears possible, though not easy. Wagons must travel one at a time. Heavy cargo should remain balanced. Every team of oxen must pull steadily without hesitation. Preparation begins immediately. You help tighten ropes securing flour barrels and wooden crates. Loose tools disappear into storage boxes. Cooking pots are wrapped inside blankets to prevent them from shifting unexpectedly. Mothers gather small children into the center of the wagons where they remain safest during the crossing. Even experienced travelers grow quieter. The mood changes nearby. A young man checks the leather harness on his lead ox for the third time. His hands move carefully across every buckle and strap. A broken harness in deep water could leave an entire wagon stranded in the current. His attention seems almost excessive. It is not. Many emigrant diaries describe similar moments of deliberate caution. Travellers often devoted hours to preparing for crossings that lasted only a few minutes. Time spent on the riverbank frequently prevented far greater losses afterward. The first wagon begins moving. Its wheels roll slowly toward the water. The oxen hesitate briefly as cool water reaches their knees. Then they continue forward with calm determination. The wagon tilts gently while entering the deeper channel. Water swirls around the wooden wheels, pushing steadily against their broad surfaces. Nobody speaks. Every eye follows the wagon. The current presses firmly against the animals, yet they continue pulling with remarkable patience. Their breathing grows heavier. Muscles ripple beneath thick hides as they lean into the harnesses. Step by step, foot by foot, the wagon reaches the opposite bank. A quiet cheer rises from both sides of the river. Relief spreads quickly through the waiting caravan. Success breeds confidence, although experienced travellers resist becoming careless. Every crossing remains unique. Every wagon carries different weight. Every team of oxen responds differently. The second wagon enters, then the third. During the fourth crossing, the left wheel strikes a submerged stone hidden beneath the cloudy water. The wagon lurches sharply. A wooden barrel shifts against another crate with a dull thud. One frightened horse tied behind the wagon pulls nervously against its rope. For a brief moment, uncertainty hangs in the air, then calm returns. The driver resists the temptation to urge the oxen forward too quickly. Instead, he allows them to regain steady footing. Their slow strength proves more valuable than sudden speed. The wagon continues safely. A deep breath escapes almost everyone watching. Researchers from Oxford University have noted that successful emigrant companies often emphasize discipline over bravery. Historical records repeatedly suggest that calm leadership reduced accidents more effectively than bold improvisation. Even so, historians still debate the extent to which experienced trail guides influence survival, since many wagon companies completed the journey without formal professional leadership. As afternoon sunlight warms the valley, more wagons complete the crossing. Wet wheels glisten beneath bright light before gradually drying as they continue westward. Boots squish softly across damp grass while travellers empty water, collected inside buckets and cooking pots. The smell changes noticeably. Fresh river water, wet leather, mud warmed by sunshine. The earthy scent lingers pleasantly in the afternoon air. You pause beside the river after your own crossing, looking back across the broad water. You realize how quickly one obstacle has become part of the landscape behind you. The river that occupied every thought only hours ago now seems almost peaceful again. The trail keeps teaching this lesson. Every challenge eventually becomes a memory. Children gather smooth stones from the opposite bank while several women spread damp blankets across bushes to dry in the afternoon breeze. Men inspect wagon axles, applying fresh grease where muddy water has washed away the previous layer. Work never truly stops. It simply changes. One elderly emigrant quietly remarks that rivers resemble life itself. They demand respect rather than fear. They reward preparation instead of confidence alone. His words drift into the breeze without ceremony. Yet several nearby travellers nod in thoughtful agreement. The afternoon journey resumes. The wagons roll west once more. Their wheels leave damp tracks that gradually dry beneath the warm sun. Behind them, the river continues flowing exactly as it has for countless generations, carrying fallen leaves, drifting branches, and silent reflections toward distant places unknown to the travellers crossing its banks. As evening settles across the plains, Camp forms beneath a stand of cottonwood trees whose broad leaves whisper softly in the cooling wind. Supper tastes especially satisfying tonight. Bean stew, coarse bread, and hot coffee feel almost luxurious after the long hours of careful concentration. Conversation grows warmer. Laughter returns. The successful crossing has quietly strengthened everyone's confidence. Tomorrow another obstacle will surely appear. Another difficult choice will demand careful thought. But tonight, the river belongs to the past, and the road continues calling you west. The prairie greets you with another clear morning, though something feels subtly different. The air carries a richer scent than before, a blend of sun-warmed grass, wildflowers, and distant sage carried across the open country by a gentle breeze. The horizon still stretches beyond sight. Yet the landscape no longer feels empty. Tiny movements appear everywhere once your eyes learn where to look. Life surrounds you. Most of it remains wonderfully unnoticed. The caravan continues west at its familiar pace. Wagon wheels roll through shallow ruts that countless emigrants have gradually carved into the earth. Oxen breathe steadily beneath polished wooden yokes. Leather harnesses creak softly with each patient step. Above everything hangs the immense blue sky, so broad that clouds seem to drift for hours without reaching the horizon. You have begun walking differently, more slowly, more observantly. Weeks upon the trail quietly sharpen your senses. At home, you might have hurried past birds, insects, and distant animals without much thought. Here, every living creature carries meaning. Some provide food, others warn of changing weather. A few simply remind weary travellers that they're crossing an ecosystem far older than any road. A sudden movement catches your attention. Several pronghorns race across the prairie. Their remarkable speed leaves only faint clouds of dust behind before they disappear beyond a gentle rise. Children point excitedly while adults pause briefly to admire the graceful animals. The moment lasts only seconds. It remains memorable for hours. Researchers from the University of Chicago have noted that emigrant journals frequently recorded encounters with wildlife in remarkable detail. For many travelers from eastern farming communities, the abundance of animals across the Great Plains seemed almost beyond imagination. Yet historians continue debating how rapidly these wildlife populations changed during the years of heavy migration, since observations varied greatly between different decades and locations. Not long afterward, another sight appears. Far ahead, dark shapes, hundreds of them. At first they resemble distant rocks scattered across the rolling grasslands. As the caravan slowly approaches, the shapes begin moving together. Massive shoulders rise and fall beneath thick coats of dark brown fur. Heavy heads sway rhythmically as enormous animals graze without apparent concern. A buffalo herd, one of the great wonders of the plains. The sight brings the entire caravan to a respectful halt. Conversation fades naturally. Even experienced travelers pause to admire the immense gathering stretching across the prairie. The animals appear almost endless, flowing across the landscape like a slow-moving river. Their scale feels impossible. Photographs do not yet exist. Only memory will preserve this moment. The deep scent of warm earth mixes with the musky odor carried by the breeze from the grazing herd. Occasionally one powerful bull raises its head, watching the distant wagons before returning to feed. Calves remain close beside older animals while countless birds flutter above the moving sea of broad backs. The ground itself seems alive. It gently trembles, not from fear, from sheer numbers. Historical evidence consistently demonstrates the importance of buffalo across the Great Plains, particularly for indigenous nations whose cultures, economies, and seasonal movements remained closely connected to these remarkable animals. Modern historians broadly agree on their central importance, although scholars continue discussing the precise size of buffalo populations before widespread commercial hunting dramatically reduced their numbers later in the 19th century. The wagon company approaches cautiously. No one wishes to disturb the herd. One experienced hunter quietly explains that frightened buffalo can become unpredictable. Their tremendous weight and momentum allow them to destroy wagons accidentally if startled during a stampede. Respect becomes the safest choice. Distance becomes wisdom. You notice another detail: silence. Despite their enormous size, the grazing herd produces surprisingly little noise. Soft grunts drift occasionally through the breeze. Hooves rustle against dry grass. Beyond that, the prairie remains peaceful. The quiet feels almost sacred. The caravan slowly changes course to avoid passing directly through the animals. The detour adds several miles to the day's journey, yet nobody argues. Certain delays deserve acceptance. Patience once again proves valuable. Around midday, the travellers stop beside a shallow creek lined with cottonwood trees. Cool shade spreads across the grass while clear water trickles gently over smooth stones. Boots come off. Feet enter the cold stream. The relief is immediate, almost luxurious. Children search beneath the water for tiny fish while several adults refill wooden barrels. Someone washes a dusty face. Another quietly mends a torn shirt using needle and thread borrowed from a neighbouring wagon. Simple comforts feel extraordinary now. The cool water numbs your tired feet for a few moments before warmth gradually returns. Above you, leaves whisper softly whenever the afternoon breeze stirs their branches. Somewhere deeper within the trees, a woodpecker taps patiently against rough bark. Nature offers small gifts. You learn to notice everyone. Modern scholars from Stanford University have observed that emigrant journals often shifted noticeably after several weeks on the trail. Writers increasingly described natural landscapes with greater detail, perhaps because daily life slowed enough for careful observation. Historians still debate whether this reflected genuine appreciation or simply the practical necessity of paying closer attention to the environment surrounding them. The afternoon journey brings new encounters. A coyote appears briefly atop a distant ridge. It pauses, looks toward the wagons, then slips quietly into the tall grass without another sound. Unlike the great buffalo herd, this lone traveller seems almost invisible. Only those watching carefully notice its departure. You wonder how many unseen creatures share the prairie each day. Far more than anyone realizes. Late in the afternoon, a flock of wild ducks rises suddenly from a marsh beside the trail. Hundreds of wings beat together, producing a rushing sound that briefly fills the air before fading into the distance. Children laugh with delight. Several adults smile as well. The journey has not become easier. It has become richer. You are beginning to understand that the California Trail offers more than hardship. It also reveals landscapes and wildlife that many emigrants could scarcely have imagined while living in settled eastern communities. Every day contains difficulty. Every day contains wonder. As evening approaches, the caravan reaches another campsite overlooking a broad stretch of prairie where golden sunlight bathes the endless grasslands. Fires soon flicker into life beneath the darkening sky. The familiar aromas of bean stew, fresh coffee, and wood smoke drift comfortably through the cool evening air. One elderly traveller quietly opens a worn notebook. He records the day's observations. Not only the miles travelled, not only the weather. He carefully writes about the buffalo herd, the clear creek, the coyote upon the ridge, and the great flight of ducks rising together into the afternoon sky. Those details matter, perhaps more than he realizes. Future generations will learn about this landscape not only through official reports or government surveys, but through ordinary people who pause long enough to notice the world around them. The stars emerge one by one above the quiet camp. The prairie settles into darkness. Somewhere beyond the firelight, countless unseen creatures continue living their own ancient rhythms, entirely unaware that a slow procession of hopeful emigrants is crossing their homeland. Tomorrow the wagons will move again. Tonight, the wilderness keeps its own peaceful watch. The prairie changes almost without announcing itself. The broad grasslands remain familiar. Yet subtle signs begin appearing long before anyone speaks about them. Fresh horse tracks cross the wagon road before fading into taller grass. Thin columns of smoke rise far away against the morning sky. A carefully shaped fire ring rests beside a stream where no emigrant company camped the previous night. You're not alone here. You never were. The California Trail passes through lands that have been home to indigenous nations for countless generations. Long before emigrant wagons rolled westward, these valleys, rivers, and plains formed part of established trade routes, hunting grounds, seasonal camps, and cultural landscapes rich with memory. To many travelers arriving from the east, the country feels newly discovered. To those already living here, it has never been unfamiliar. That difference matters. It shapes every encounter. The caravan moves quietly beneath a pale blue sky. The morning breeze carries the dry fragrance of sage mixed with the sweeter scent of flowering prairie plants. Cottonwood leaves shimmer softly beside a winding creek while distant hawks circle above the open grasslands. Someone points ahead. Riders appear on the horizon. At first they are little more than dark silhouettes against the morning light. Gradually they become clearer. Several indigenous men approach at an easy pace, guiding their horses with relaxed confidence. They show no sign of urgency. Their movements suggest familiarity with every rise and stream surrounding them. The wagon company slows naturally. Not from panic, from caution. Several experienced emigrants quietly remind everyone to remain calm. Weapons stay where they belong. Voices remain respectful. Children are gently asked to stay close to their families. The atmosphere grows attentive, not hostile. Historical records consistently reveal that many meetings along the California Trail unfolded peacefully through trade and conversation rather than conflict. Researchers from Yale University have emphasized that surviving emigrant diaries frequently describe exchanges involving food, livestock, directions, and practical information. At the same time, historians continue debating how representative those surviving accounts remain because records differ greatly across regions and years. The riders stop a comfortable distance away. For several quiet moments, no one speaks. Then one of the wagon company's leaders raises his hand in greeting. The gesture receives an equally calm response. Soon both groups move slightly closer while maintaining respectful space between them. No dramatic speeches follow, only practical conversation. Language barriers exist, yet human communication extends beyond words alone. Smiles appear cautiously, hands point toward horses, wagons, and nearby streams. A young boy offers several bright buttons from his pocket. One of the visitors smiles warmly before presenting the child with a beautifully shaped feather. The exchange lasts only seconds. The memory lasts much longer. Nearby, several women begin preparing coffee while another family offers small pieces of bread. In return, fresh fish recently caught from a nearby river are presented with quiet generosity. The food changes hands naturally, without ceremony. Trade begins simply. Trust grows slowly. Many emigrants quickly discover that indigenous knowledge of the landscape often proves remarkably valuable. They understand river crossings, seasonal water sources, grazing conditions, and weather patterns developed through generations of careful observation. One elderly traveler listens closely as directions toward a safer crossing are explained through gestures and a mixture of familiar and unfamiliar words. Every piece of knowledge matters, especially here. Modern historians associated with Stanford University have noted that numerous emigrant journals acknowledge receiving practical assistance from indigenous communities during difficult portions of the journey. Historians still debate how often such cooperation occurred, because later popular stories sometimes emphasized conflict while overlooking routine acts of mutual assistance documented in contemporary records. The morning continues peacefully. Soon both groups prepare to depart. The riders disappear across the prairie almost as quietly as they arrived, leaving behind little more than hoof prints fading into the grass. The caravan resumes its journey. Conversation becomes thoughtful. Many travelers quietly reconsider assumptions they carried from home. Stories heard before departure often painted the frontier in simple terms of danger or safety. Friend or enemy, reality proves far more complicated. Human beings rarely fit simple stories. History certainly does not. By midday, the trail follows a broad river lined with willow trees, whose branches dip gently toward the flowing water. The cool shade offers welcome relief from the strengthening sun. Travellers remove hats and wash dusty faces while livestock drinks deeply from the slow current. The smell of wet earth rises pleasantly. So does fresh grass. Nearby, several children discover carefully woven baskets resting beside an abandoned fishing place. The baskets remain untouched. An experienced guide quietly explains that they belong to people who will likely return soon. Respect requires restraint. Nothing is taken. Small decisions like these shape relationships more than dramatic moments ever could. You sit quietly beneath a cottonwood tree, listening to wind moving softly through its leaves. The sound resembles distant rainfall. It mixes with the gentle splash of water against muddy banks and the occasional call of unseen birds deeper within the trees. Peace feels fragile, yet very real. Historical evidence suggests that many wagon companies consciously attempted to maintain respectful relations whenever possible. Trade benefited everyone. Conflict endangered everyone. Even so, the rapid increase in emigrant traffic during the 1840s, and especially after the discovery of gold, created growing pressure upon resources, travel routes, and traditional homelands. This change unfolds gradually. Its consequences reach far. Researchers from Harvard University have emphasized that increasing migration transformed the American West in ways affecting both newcomers and indigenous nations. While broad agreement exists regarding these profound changes, historians continue discussing the relative importance of disease, environmental transformation, government policy, commerce, and settlement patterns in shaping different communities across the region. The afternoon passes beneath brilliant sunshine. A herd of horses grazes peacefully upon distant hills while scattered prairie dogs disappear into their burrows as the caravan approaches. Children laugh at the tiny animals before continuing beside the wagons. Life continues everywhere, not only along the trail. Late in the day, dark clouds briefly gather above the western horizon before dissolving beneath changing winds. Cool air follows for a short while, carrying the clean scent of approaching autumn even though summer still lingers. The seasons move quietly. So do people. As evening approaches, camp forms beside another clear stream. Fires soon flicker beneath tall cottonwood trees while smoke rises gently into the darkening sky. Supper tastes especially satisfying after another long day of walking. Bean stew simmers slowly while fresh fish traded earlier cooks over glowing coals. Conversation remains gentle tonight, reflective. One older woman quietly remarks that every landscape holds stories older than the road crossing it. Several nearby travelers nod thoughtfully, looking around the peaceful campsite. The observation feels impossible to dismiss. The California Trail is not creating history from empty ground. It is joining an older history already unfolding. The stars gradually appear above the silent prairie. Beyond the fading firelight, familiar paths continue stretching across the land, some marked by wagon wheels, others by countless generations of footsteps that came long before. You understand something new before sleep arrives. Every journey enters a place already shaped by the journeys of others. The prairie no longer feels endless. Almost without noticing when the change began, you find yourself walking toward a horizon that finally rises instead of remaining flat. Gentle hills slowly become longer ridges. Valleys deepen. The wind carries a cooler edge during the early morning hours. Even the sunlight seems different, softer at dawn and sharper by afternoon. The land is changing. So are you. The familiar sea of grass still surrounds the caravan, yet the open country gradually begins yielding to higher ground. Every mile west brings a subtle increase in elevation. The climb is so gradual that few travellers recognize it from one day to the next. Only after many weeks does the transformation become unmistakable. Breathing feels slightly different. The air seems thinner, not dramatically, just enough to notice during long climbs beside the wagons. The California Trail rewards those who pay attention to small changes. A patch of greener grass often signals nearby water. A line of cottonwood trees usually marks a stream. Dark clouds forming behind distant hills deserve careful observation long before rain begins. Nature rarely shouts. It prefers quiet warnings. Researchers from Princeton University have observed that emigrant diaries often reveal an increasing awareness of environmental detail as travelers moved farther west. Practical survival depended upon recognizing subtle patterns in weather, vegetation, and terrain. Historians continue debating how much of this knowledge developed through experience on the trail versus advice passed from earlier emigrants. Morning travel unfolds beneath scattered clouds drifting lazily across an immense blue sky. The scent of dry sage grows stronger than before. Wildflowers become less frequent. Grass appears shorter in many places where the soil grows thinner across rocky slopes. Your boots strike firmer ground. Loose stones replace soft earth. The wagons respond immediately. Wooden wheels no longer roll smoothly across packed prairie. Instead, they bounce gently over uneven surfaces, producing a deeper rhythm of creaks and rattles. Every sound changes, even familiar ones. The oxen lean more noticeably into their harnesses as the trail begins climbing another broad ridge. Their breathing grows heavier during the steepest stretches, though their steady pace never falters. Sweat darkens the coarse hair along their shoulders before drying quickly beneath the warm afternoon sun. You admire their patience. It never seems to fade. One young traveller reaches forward to gently pat the neck of his lead ox after a difficult climb. The great animal barely acknowledges the gesture, continuing its work with quiet determination. Strength often appears ordinary, until it becomes necessary. Around midday, the caravan pauses beside a small spring emerging from a rocky hillside. Unlike the broad rivers that guided earlier weeks of travel, this water source feels modest and easily overlooked. Crystal clear water trickles gently into a shallow pool surrounded by smooth stones polished through countless seasons. Everyone gathers carefully. The spring is precious. Tin cups fill one by one. Horses lower their heads gratefully. Children splash cool water across dusty faces while several women refill cooking kettles with measured care. The water tastes wonderfully cold, almost sweet. Nearby, one older emigrant quietly remarks that mountain water always seems to carry a different freshness. Whether true or simply imagined, nobody argues. After hours beneath the warm sun, every sip feels deeply satisfying. A gentle breeze moves across the hillside. It carries the scent of pine. The smell surprises you, until now. The fragrance of grass, sage, and riverbanks has defined the journey. That faint hint of evergreen announces another change waiting somewhere ahead. Forested country lies closer than before. The mountains are calling, still distant, yet unmistakably present. Modern historians associated with the University of California have noted that many emigrants describe these gradual environmental transitions with remarkable precision. Their journals reveal careful observations of changing plants, wildlife, and weather patterns long before reaching the Rocky Mountains. Historians still discuss how accurately these personal accounts reflected broader environmental conditions because seasonal differences often produce dramatically different experiences. Afternoon clouds begin gathering above the higher ridges. Their shadows drift slowly across the rolling landscape, offering brief moments of welcome shade before sunlight returns once more. The wind grows cooler, then stronger. Dust no longer rises as heavily from the trail. Rocky ground keeps much of it settled beneath the wagon wheels. Instead, the air carries the earthy scent of sun-warmed stone mixed with dry shrubs growing among scattered outcrops. The landscape feels older somehow, more rugged, more deliberate. You notice fewer birds singing than on the broad plains behind you. Instead, Occasional ravens glide effortlessly along rising currents of warm air. Their deep calls echo faintly against nearby hills before fading into silence. Silence itself changes. It becomes larger. The open prairie once seemed filled with endless sounds carried across great distances. Here, the land absorbs noise differently. Valleys hold echoes briefly before releasing them. Rocky slopes soften the voices of travellers spread along the winding trail. Conversation naturally becomes quieter. People listen more late in the afternoon. The caravan encounters a section of trail where recent rains have carved deep channels across the road. Progress slows considerably. Several wagons require additional help climbing short but slippery inclines. Nobody complains. Everyone helps. Strong ropes appear almost immediately. Additional oxen are borrowed from neighbouring wagons. Men push carefully against heavy wheels while women steady shifting cargo inside the wagons. The work is exhausting. The success belongs to everyone. Historical journals repeatedly describe these moments of collective effort. Researchers from Columbia University have observed that wagon companies often became increasingly cooperative as the terrain grew more demanding. Historians continue debating whether these stronger bonds resulted primarily from necessity or from the friendships gradually built during months of shared travel. The final wagon clears the difficult slope just as golden afternoon light begins spreading across the hills. A gentle cheer rises from those already waiting above. No speech follows. None is needed. Shared accomplishment creates its own quiet celebration. As evening approaches, the caravan selects a campsite overlooking a broad valley stretching westward beneath the fading sun. The view seems almost endless. Layers of distant hills fade gradually from green into soft blue before disappearing into the horizon. You stand quietly, simply watching. The cool evening breeze carries the scent of pine more strongly now. Somewhere nearby, unseen crickets begin their evening chorus. Fires soon flicker among the wagons while thin columns of smoke drift upward through perfectly still air. Supper feels comforting after the long climbs. Fresh biscuits bake inside cast iron ovens covered with glowing coals. Bean stew simmers slowly while coffee bubbles gently inside blackened pots. Warm food, tired muscles, quiet satisfaction. One elderly woman unfolds a small map beside the firelight, comparing today's progress with the faded lines drawn upon the paper. She smiles softly. The highest country still lies ahead, but the caravan has reached its threshold. The Great Plains now belong behind you. Beyond the darkening hills waits an entirely different chapter of the journey, where every mile upward will test strength, patience, and resolve in ways the open prairie never could. The mountains remain silent. They are waiting. The morning begins with a welcome chill. You wake beneath a blanket that feels heavier than it did only a week ago. Cool air settles quietly across the valley, carrying the clean scent of pine needles, damp earth, and stone still holding the memory of the night. When you step outside the wagon, your boots press against crisp grass sparkling with tiny drops of dew. Autumn feels closer now, even though summer has not yet ended. The caravan gathers before sunrise with unusual anticipation. For weeks, conversation has often returned to one destination more than any other. Guides mention it with calm confidence. Returning travellers describe it with quiet respect. Mapmakers draw it as one of the most significant landmarks on the entire overland journey. South Pass, the famous gateway through the Rocky Mountains. Unlike the towering cliffs many people imagine when hearing the word mountain pass, South Pass surprises almost everyone seeing it for the first time. It is broad rather than narrow, gentle rather than dramatic. Instead of forcing travellers through steep canyons, it offers a gradual crossing where wagons can climb without impossible slopes. Its greatness lies in its simplicity. That simplicity changes history. Researchers from the University of Oxford have long emphasised that South Pass became one of the most strategically important natural corridors in Western North America. historians broadly agree that without this remarkably accessible crossing, large-scale wagon migration would have faced far greater obstacles. Even so, scholars continue discussing how different Western settlement might have been had emigrants relied upon more difficult mountain routes. The caravan begins moving before the first sunlight reaches the highest ridges. The climb feels steady, almost patient. The trail winds gently upward through broad valleys, where bunches of sagebrush sway beneath the cool breeze. Granite outcrops rise beside the road, their weathered faces marked by centuries of wind, snow, and rain. Scattered pines cling to rocky slopes while small streams tumble quietly across polished stones. Every breath feels fresher. Every step feels earned. You notice something remarkable. Despite climbing into the mountains, the route avoids the terrifying cliffs that once filled your imagination. The ascent unfolds gradually over many miles. The oxen continue pulling with their familiar determination, though their breathing grows deeper during the longest inclines. The designers of no road deserve the credit. Nature provided this passage long before wagons arrived, long before emigrants crossed these valleys. Indigenous peoples and experienced mountain travelers understood the value of this remarkable corridor. Their knowledge of the landscape eventually guided explorers, traders, and settlers toward one of the few practical wagon routes through the immense mountain barrier. History rarely begins where written records begin. It reaches much farther back. The morning sun finally rises above distant ridges, bathing the landscape in soft golden light. Shadows stretch across the valleys while patches of morning frost slowly disappear beneath the growing warmth. The scenery feels quieter here, almost solemn. Conversation fades naturally as travelers absorb the significance of their surroundings. Some have dreamed about reaching this point for years. Others understand only now how much ground already lies behind them. The eastern plains are gone. Ahead waits the American West in a new form. A young boy walks beside his father without speaking for nearly an hour. Eventually he asks a simple question. Is this the top? His father smiles gently before looking toward the broad horizon. Almost. The answer carries more meaning than either of them fully realizes. Modern historians associated with Princeton University have noted that reaching South Pass often marked an important psychological milestone recorded in emigrant journals. Many travelers described feeling both encouraged and humbled at the same time. Historians still debate whether this emotional shift reflected the physical landscape itself or the growing confidence earned through months of successful travel. Near midday, the caravan pauses beside a clear mountain stream flowing over smooth granite stones. The water moves swiftly yet remains wonderfully transparent. Tiny fish dart beneath the surface before vanishing into deeper pools. You kneel to drink. The water is icy. It refreshes every tired muscle. Nearby, several emigrants wash shirts and blankets while others inspect wagon wheels that have endured weeks of constant strain. Grease is applied carefully to wooden axles. Loose bolts receive another turn. Leather harnesses are examined for fresh signs of wear. Maintenance never ends. Neither does the road. The smell of pine resin grows stronger as the afternoon unfolds. Warm sunlight heats the trunks of the evergreen trees, releasing a clean fragrance that drifts gently through the mountain air. It mixes with the faint aroma of coffee brewing over a nearby fire during the midday halt. The scent feels unforgettable. It becomes part of the journey itself. You continue climbing throughout the afternoon, though the ascent remains surprisingly gentle. The trail broadens in places, allowing several wagons to travel side by side, looking behind you. The immense landscape stretches eastward in layer after layer of fading hills, until finally disappearing into a pale blue haze. The distance seems impossible, yet you walked it. One older emigrant quietly removes his hat before turning toward the eastern horizon. He stands silently for several moments, perhaps remembering home, perhaps honoring the journey already completed. No one interrupts him. Some reflections deserve privacy. Historical records reveal that many emigrants experience moments like this at major landmarks. Researchers from Stanford University have observed that surviving letters often became more reflective after reaching important geographical milestones. Still, historians continue discussing how much these emotions were shaped by later memory, when journals were revised or expanded after the journey ended. The western side of South Pass gradually comes into view. Another world appears. Instead of signalling the end of hardship, the pass reveals an entirely new landscape waiting beyond. Broad valleys descend toward distant rivers, while unfamiliar mountain ranges stand far beyond the horizon. The crossing changes direction, not destiny. The caravan pauses briefly near the highest practical point of the route. Travelers exchange quiet smiles. Children climb onto nearby rocks for a better view. Several people remove small notebooks from their pockets to record the date beside careful descriptions of the pass. No monument stands here. The land itself is enough. As evening approaches, the wagons descend gently into another broad valley where fresh grass offers excellent grazing for the oxen. Camp forms beside a winding creek bordered by clusters of willow trees. The soft murmur of flowing water accompanies the familiar sounds of evening preparations. Smoke rises lazily. Coffee brews. Bread bakes beneath glowing coals. The day's conversations revolve around a shared realization. The mountains that once seemed impossible have allowed passage, not through force, through patience. You sit quietly beside the fire as darkness settles across the valley. Above you, countless stars appear brighter than ever in the clear mountain air. The flames crackle softly while the cool breeze carries the comforting scent of burning pine. Behind you lies the great crossing of the Rockies. Ahead waits harsher country, wider deserts, and challenges no less demanding than those already overcome. Still, tonight brings quiet satisfaction. You've crossed one of the greatest gateways in the history of the American West. The trail continues. So does your journey. The mountain air gradually begins losing its cool edge. Day by day, almost too slowly to notice. The valleys become broader while the streams grow farther apart. Pine forests thin into scattered groves. Green meadows surrender to pale grasses and hardy shrubs that seem perfectly content beneath an unforgiving sun. The landscape grows quieter. Water becomes the loudest sound. You leave camp before sunrise as countless travelers have done for weeks. The eastern sky glows with soft shades of amber while the western horizon remains wrapped in deep blue shadow. The cool morning breeze feels refreshing against your face, yet everyone understands that this comfort will not last. By afternoon, heat will rule. The wagons move steadily across rolling country, where dry hills stretch toward distant mountain ranges. Their blue silhouettes shimmer faintly through warm air, always appearing closer than they truly are. Distance becomes deceptive. The desert enjoys such illusions. Although the California Trail passes through several different arid regions rather than one continuous desert. Emigrants often remembered these sections as among the most physically demanding of the entire journey. Long distances without dependable water demanded careful planning. A wrong decision could quickly become dangerous. Modern historians associated with the University of California have emphasized that the Great Basin presented challenges unlike those of the plains or mountains, unlike earlier portions of the trail. Many valleys here offered no rivers leading naturally toward the sea. Historians continue debating how accurately emigrants understood this unfamiliar geography before experiencing it themselves, since maps available during the 1840s often simplified these complicated landscapes. The morning passes peacefully. Too peacefully, you notice fewer birds than before, even insects seem less numerous. The only constant sound comes from the steady crunch of wagon wheels crossing dry gravel and compacted earth. Dust returns, finer than ever. Each passing wagon lifts a pale cloud that hangs lazily in the still air before drifting across the trail. The dust settles into clothing, gathers inside hats, and coats every visible surface with a thin layer of powder. You wipe your face. The dust quickly returns. Nobody wastes energy complaining. There is little value in resisting conditions beyond human control. Instead, attention shifts toward practical concerns. Every water barrel receives careful inspection before departure. Families quietly calculate how much can be safely consumed before reaching the next reliable spring. Every cup matters. Every drop carries weight. Around mid-morning, the caravan encounters another emigrant company traveling several days ahead. They have paused beside a small spring emerging from cracked volcanic rock. The spring is modest, yet everyone smiles upon seeing it. Fresh water flows steadily into a shallow basin surrounded by smooth stones darkened by constant moisture. Travellers patiently wait their turn. Horses drink deeply. Oxen lower their massive heads with visible relief. The scent of damp earth fills the air. It feels almost luxurious. Several women soak cloths inside the cool water before placing them gently across the foreheads of tired children. Nearby, one elderly traveller quietly fills his tin cup and drinks without speaking. Some moments require silence. This is one of them. Historical journals frequently describe the emotional significance of dependable water sources across the Great Basin. Researchers from Harvard University have noted that emigrants often measured progress not by miles alone, but by the springs, streams, and rivers connecting each stage of the journey. Historians still debate the exact reliability of many recorded water sources because seasonal conditions varied enormously between dry and wet years. The caravan rests only briefly. Lingering too long serves little purpose. The afternoon heat arrives with remarkable determination. Sunlight reflects brightly from pale soil and weathered stone. Warm air shimmers above the trail until distant wagons appear to float upon invisible waves. Mirages begin forming. They fool almost everyone once. Far ahead, what appears to be a shining lake slowly dissolves into empty ground as the caravan approaches. Even experienced travellers occasionally glance twice before recognizing the familiar illusion. Hope itself can deceive. The desert understands that well. You continue walking beside the wagon rather than riding inside it. Surprisingly, many emigrants find walking easier than enduring the constant jolting movement across uneven ground. Each step raises tiny clouds of dust. Each breath feels warmer. Leather harnesses creak softly while the oxen continue their patient work beneath the relentless sun. Their endurance becomes increasingly impressive. They neither hurry nor hesitate. Steady effort wins again. It almost always does. Late in the afternoon, the trail crosses a broad expanse of cracked earth where almost no vegetation survives. Wind has sculpted delicate patterns across the dry surface, creating gentle ripples resembling waves frozen in time. The silence feels enormous. Even conversation becomes quieter. One young girl asks her mother whether anything lives here. Her mother pauses thoughtfully, then points toward a small lizard disappearing between scattered stones. Life remains present. It simply becomes harder to see. Researchers from Stanford University have observed that emigrant diaries frequently reflected changing emotional responses as landscapes became harsher. Early excitement often gave way to disciplined concentration during these demanding stretches. Historians continue discussing whether these emotional changes resulted primarily from physical exhaustion or from the psychological effect of prolonged exposure to unfamiliar environments. The afternoon eventually softens into evening. Long shadows stretch across the valley while the intense heat gradually begins releasing its hold upon the land. A welcome breeze returns. Cooler now, almost gentle. The caravan reaches another precious spring surrounded by low willow shrubs and patches of green grass that seem almost miraculous after the long day's march. Camp forms quickly. Everyone understands why. Animals receive water before almost anything else. Buckets pass steadily from hand to hand. Cooking fires appear only after every wagon has secured its place beside the limited grazing ground. The smell of wood smoke soon drifts through the cooling air. So does fresh coffee. Simple bean stew simmers quietly while coarse bread warms beside glowing coals. Dusty boots rest beside the fires. Jackets hung upon wagon wheels slowly cool beneath the evening breeze. The day's hardship begins fading. Conversation returns. Someone quietly jokes that the dust probably weighs more than the wagon by now. Gentle laughter spreads through the camp. Even tired smiles feel valuable after such demanding travel. Humor survives remarkably well. Even here, as darkness settles across the basin, the stars appear with astonishing clarity. Without moisture or smoke clouding the atmosphere, the night sky seems almost impossibly bright. Thousands of stars stretch across the heavens while the pale ribbon of the Milky Way arches silently above the sleeping caravan. You lie beneath the open sky. The earth still radiates warmth gathered throughout the day. Somewhere beyond these dry valleys waits another great obstacle. Beyond that, California draws steadily closer. The desert has offered no dramatic battle, only quiet endurance, and perhaps that has always been its greatest challenge. Tomorrow, the road will ask for that same patience once again. The first light of dawn reveals a distant line unlike anything you have yet encountered. Far beyond the dry valleys, above the shimmering air of the Great Basin, enormous mountains rise with quiet authority. Their highest peaks glow pale gold where the morning sun touches fresh snow, while their lower slopes remain wrapped in deep blue shadow. The Sierra Nevada, the final Great Barrier, for countless emigrants. This sight brings two conflicting emotions at once. California lies beyond those mountains, closer than ever before, yet between hope and arrival stands the most demanding natural obstacle of the entire journey. The road narrows, the challenge grows, the caravan leaves camp while the air is still cool. A gentle breeze carries the scent of dry sage mixed with something unfamiliar. As the morning progresses, that faint fragrance slowly changes into the clean aroma of pine carried down from the distant forests. You notice the difference immediately. The mountains announce themselves through scent before touch. The trail gradually begins climbing once more. Unlike the broad and forgiving ascent towards South Pass, these slopes feel more direct. Rocky ground replaces the dusty valleys. Small streams appear again, though they remain widely separated. Granite cliffs rise beside portions of the trail, their weathered faces glowing softly beneath the growing sunlight. Every step feels heavier. Not discouraging, simply honest. Modern historians associated with Stanford University have emphasized that crossing the Sierra Nevada represented one of the greatest logistical challenges facing emigrants on the California Trail. Historians broadly agree that timing proved absolutely critical. Those arriving too late in the season risked early snowstorms capable of trapping entire wagon companies. Even so, scholars continue discussing how much practical knowledge about seasonal conditions reached emigrants before they began their westward journeys. The wagons move more slowly than at any previous stage. No one seems surprised. Steep grades demand patience from both people and animals. Oxen lower their broad heads, leaning firmly into heavy wooden yokes. Every muscle along their shoulders tightens beneath the strain. Wagon wheels grind against loose stone before finding solid purchase once again. The pace becomes measured, almost ceremonial. You occasionally hear the sharp sound of iron striking rock beneath the wheels. Leather harnesses stretch and groan with every difficult climb. Somewhere farther ahead, someone calls softly to encourage a tired team of oxen. No shouting follows. Calm remains more effective. The mountain air grows noticeably cooler as elevation increases. Breathing feels easier than during the desert crossing. Though climbing soon replaces heat as the greater source of fatigue, the cool breeze feels refreshing. It also reminds you of approaching autumn. Along the trail, towering pine trees begin appearing in greater numbers. Their straight trunks rise high above the caravan while scattered cones cover the forest floor beneath them. Sunlight filters through countless green needles, creating shifting patterns of light and shadow across the narrow road. The forest changes everything, even the silence. Birdsong echoes gently between the trees. A woodpecker taps rhythmically somewhere beyond sight. Squirrels dart across fallen logs before disappearing into dense undergrowth. After weeks beneath open skies, the The forest feels almost enclosed, comfortingly so. During the midday halt, the caravan stops beside a swift mountain creek flowing over smooth granite boulders. The water runs so clear that every pebble resting on the bottom appears sharply defined. You remove your boots. The water is startlingly cold. It sends a pleasant ache through tired feet before gradually becoming wonderfully refreshing. Nearby, several travellers refill barrels while others collect fallen branches for evening fires. Fresh pine needles release a crisp fragrance beneath every careful step. The smell lingers beautifully. You suspect you will remember it forever. Researchers from Harvard University have observed that many emigrant diaries describe the Sierra forests with deep admiration despite the hardships of crossing them. Historians continue debating whether these accounts reflected genuine emotional relief after the deserts, or whether later memories naturally emphasized the beauty of reaching greener country once again. The afternoon climb becomes steeper. Several wagons require assistance. Strong ropes are tied between neighbouring teams of oxen, allowing two groups of animals to pull together during particularly difficult sections. Men place sturdy wooden blocks behind the wheels whenever the caravan pauses, preventing the heavy wagons from rolling backward. Progress slows considerably. No one complains. The trail itself allows little room for impatience. You watch one experienced wagon master quietly inspect every wheel before another climb. He runs his hand along the wooden spokes, listening as much as looking. A faint crack hidden beneath fresh dust might become disastrous on a steep descent. His caution feels reassuring. Experience speaks quietly. Historical records consistently emphasize the importance of careful equipment maintenance during mountain crossings. Researchers from the University of Chicago have noted that damaged wagons often required immediate repair because replacement materials became increasingly difficult to obtain in remote high country. Historians still debate exactly how many wagons were abandoned in the Sierra because surviving estimates vary considerably among different contemporary accounts. Late in the afternoon, the caravan reaches a narrow overlook where the forest briefly opens. The view is astonishing. Behind you stretches an immense landscape of valleys, ridges, and distant plains fading gradually into the horizon. Somewhere beyond those nearly invisible hills lies the Missouri frontier that once seemed impossibly far away. Now it feels almost unreal. The distance humbles everyone. Several travelers stand quietly without speaking. One woman gently removes her bonnet, allowing the cool mountain breeze to move through her hair before replacing it once more. Some memories deserve complete attention. This becomes one of them. As evening approaches, the caravan reaches a sheltered meadow surrounded by tall pines and massive granite outcrops, polished smooth by countless winters. A clear stream winds peacefully across the grass before disappearing beneath thick stands of evergreen trees. Camp forms with practiced efficiency. The routine now feels effortless. Smoke from cooking fires rises almost straight upward through the still evening air. Fresh bread bakes slowly beneath cast iron lids, while stew simmers inside blackened kettles. The comforting aromas mingle with pine resin and cool mountain air. The combination feels unforgettable. Children gather fallen cones for tomorrow's fires. Adults quietly inspect maps illuminated by the warm glow of lanterns. Several older emigrants discuss the remaining distance to the western slopes. California's close now, closer than ever before, yet everyone understands that the mountains still demand respect. A sudden storm, an early snowfall, a broken wagon. Any one of these could transform confidence into hardship within a single day. The Sierra rewards preparation, nothing less. Night settles gently across the forest. The stars appear between the tall pines, framed by dark branches reaching silently toward the heavens. A nearby owl calls once before the woods return to quiet stillness. You wrap your blanket a little tighter against the cool air. The fire crackles softly. Tomorrow the caravan will climb higher still, carrying every hope, every sacrifice, and every dream toward the final gateway leading to California. The mountains remain patient. They have watched travelers for generations. Tonight, They watch over yours. The forest grows quieter as the final mountain miles gradually fall behind you. Morning sunlight filters through towering pines before spilling across lower hills where the trees begin to thin. Cool mountain air slowly gives way to a gentler warmth. Streams become wider, valleys open toward the west. Every step carries an almost unfamiliar feeling. Arrival is no longer a dream, it is approaching. The caravan pauses at a broad overlook where the western landscape stretches toward distant horizons softened by a faint blue haze. Somewhere beyond those rolling valleys lies California, a place that has lived in conversation, imagination, and expectation for many months. You have not reached it yet. Still, something has changed. The hardest natural barriers now rest behind you. Travelers notice the difference immediately. Smiles appear more often, conversations become livelier, even the oxen seem to move with renewed confidence as the trail gradually descends from the high country. Hope gains weight, fatigue begins losing it, yet the California awaiting these emigrants is changing almost as rapidly as they are approaching it. Only a few years earlier, the journey west had been driven largely by the promise of farmland, healthier climates, commercial opportunity, and the possibility of building entirely new communities. Then everything changed. Gold was discovered. The news spread with astonishing speed. The discovery at Sutter's Mill in early 1848 transformed California from a distant destination into one of the greatest migration targets in modern history. Within months, newspapers, letters, ships, merchants, and travelers carried extraordinary stories across the United States and around the world. Some stories proved accurate. Many became greatly exaggerated. Researchers from Harvard University have emphasized that the California Gold Rush represented one of the largest voluntary migrations in American history. Historians broadly agree that the discovery fundamentally reshaped California's population, economy, and political development. Even so, scholars continue debating how much of the migration resulted from verified reports versus powerful rumors that encouraged people to imagine fortunes waiting for anyone willing to travel west. The trail reflects those changes almost everywhere. As your caravan continues descending toward lower country, you begin encountering increasing numbers of travelers moving in both directions. Some continue west filled with expectation. Others head east carrying letters, samples of gold-bearing rock, and stories impossible to ignore. Dust rises around every meeting. Questions follow immediately. How much gold? Where? Is it true? Few conversations remain brief. One returning miner quietly removes a small leather pouch from inside his coat. Without speaking, he pours several tiny yellow flakes into his open hand. Sunlight catches the metal instantly. No explanation is necessary. The tiny pieces glitter with remarkable brightness before disappearing once more inside the pouch. Silence follows, then whispers. The emotional atmosphere changes almost immediately. Even those who never intended to become miners begin wondering whether they should alter their plans after reaching California. Gold changes conversations, long before it changes lives. Historical letters written during these years repeatedly describe this growing uncertainty. Families who originally planned to establish farms suddenly debated mining instead. Merchants reconsidered opening shops. Skilled carpenters realized that building houses might prove more profitable than searching for precious metal. Opportunity becomes complicated. Choices multiply. Modern historians associated with Stanford University have noted that many successful fortunes during the gold rush came not from mining itself, but from providing goods and services to rapidly growing communities. Historians still debate how widely this economic reality was understood by emigrants before arriving in California, since newspapers naturally favor dramatic stories of spectacular discoveries. The afternoon journey continues beneath warm sunshine. The landscape changes steadily. Oak trees begin appearing among open hills. Broad valleys display richer soil than many travelers have seen for months. Wildflowers return in colourful patches where fresh streams nourish the land. The scent changes too. Dry sage gives way to warm earth. Fresh grass and flowering shrubs carried gently by the afternoon breeze. You breathe deeply. The air feels welcoming. One elderly woman quietly remarks that the country somehow smells fertile. No scientific measurement supports such an observation. Yet many nearby travellers smile in agreement. After so many months, the senses notice everything. Even hope seems to have its own fragrance. Around midday, the caravan reaches a small settlement that has expanded remarkably within only a few seasons. Fresh wooden buildings stand beside older structures. Blacksmith shops ring with the sharp sound of hammers striking glowing iron. Wagons crowd narrow streets while merchants advertise tools, boots, flour, tents, and mining equipment. Business never seems to stop, neither do the conversations. The smell of fresh sawdust mixes with hot iron, horse sweat, coffee, and newly baked bread. Workers unload barrels from wagons almost as quickly as others reload them with entirely different cargo. Growth feels almost visible. Every day changes something. Researchers from the University of California have observed that many California communities expanded at extraordinary speed during the gold rush years. Historians broadly agree that towns appeared, disappeared, and transformed with remarkable frequency as mining activity shifted from one location to another. Yet scholars continue debating the long-term sustainability of many early settlements, because some flourished while others vanished almost completely. You notice another striking difference. Languages, accents, faces from distant places. People from across the United States mingle with newcomers arriving from Europe, Latin America, Australia, and Asia. The streets reflect an increasingly international frontier connected by ambition rather than geography alone. California becomes a meeting place, not simply a destination. Late in the afternoon, your caravan resumes its westward movement after replenishing essential supplies. Several families purchase fresh flour, others replace worn wagon parts, or acquire stronger tools for whatever opportunities may soon appear. Every purchase reflects expectation. Nobody knows the future. One young couple quietly discusses whether to continue toward farmland as originally planned. Nearby, another family has already decided to head directly toward the mining districts. Neither choice guarantees success. Both require courage. Historical evidence consistently shows that emigrants responded differently to the gold rush, depending upon age, family responsibilities, financial resources, and personal experience. Researchers from Yale University have noted that no single pattern explains every decision. Historians continue discussing the balance between careful planning and spontaneous opportunity that characterized these remarkable years. Evening arrives beneath a sky painted with soft shades of amber and rose. Camp forms beside a peaceful river whose gentle current reflects the fading sunlight. The familiar rituals begin once more. Coffee brews, bread warms, fires crackle, yet something feels different tonight. California no longer exists only in imagination. It surrounds you, across the camp. Conversations drift toward tomorrow instead of yesterday. Some speak of fertile valleys waiting beyond the next ridge. Others wonder whether fortune truly lies hidden beneath river gravel. A few simply express quiet gratitude for surviving the long road west. You understand all of them. Every dream has travelled here together. The flames dance gently beneath the darkening sky while distant frogs begin calling from the river banks above. Countless stars slowly emerge just as they did back on the Missouri frontier many months ago. The sky has remained familiar. Everything else has changed. The California Trail has carried you across a continent. Now it begins revealing what that extraordinary journey was truly leading toward. Morning arrives with a softer light than any you have known since leaving the Missouri frontier. A gentle layer of mist hangs above broad rivers winding through fertile valleys. Oak trees cast long shadows across open meadows where cattle graze quietly beneath the warming sun. The air carries the scent of rich soil, fresh grass, flowering shrubs, and wood smoke drifting lazily from scattered cabins. California greets you gently, not dramatically. After months of crossing plains, mountains, rivers, and deserts, the land itself seems almost determined to welcome exhausted travelers with quiet generosity. The wagon rolls downhill. The valley opens before you. You pause for a moment beside a broad hillside, looking west. Farms stretch across the landscape in irregular patches of green and gold. Wooden fences enclose orchards newly planted by earlier settlers. Small vineyards climb gentle slopes where the afternoon sun lingers longest. The country appears peaceful, yet beneath that calm surface, extraordinary change is unfolding. The California reached by the earliest emigrants of the 1840s differs greatly from the California transformed by the gold rush. Within only a few years, isolated settlements have become busy communities. New roads branch away from the original trail. River crossings, once handled by simple ferries, now support increasing commercial traffic. Growth seems constant, almost relentless. Researchers from the University of California have emphasized that California experienced one of the fastest population expansions in 19th century American history, following the discovery of gold. Historians broadly agree that this rapid growth reshaped the region's economy and political future. At the same time, scholars continue debating how evenly prosperity spread because remarkable wealth often existed beside profound hardship. The caravan continues toward one of the growing settlements. The road becomes busier. Wagons arrive from every direction carrying furniture, livestock, mining tools, timber, food, and countless other supplies. Horsemen ride quickly between towns delivering letters and business agreements. Ox-drawn freight wagons creak beneath loads far heavier than those carried by ordinary emigrant families. Commerce has found its rhythm. It rarely pauses. The sounds surrounding you feel unfamiliar after months in the wilderness. Blacksmith hammers ring sharply across the streets. Sawmills produce a steady chorus of cutting timber. Merchants call greetings from open storefronts, while children chase one another between newly constructed buildings. Life feels energetic, almost overwhelming. For many travelers, this noise creates mixed emotions. After growing accustomed to the peaceful cadence of the trail, busy settlements seem strangely hurried. You almost miss the silence. That realization surprises you. The California Trail has quietly changed your expectations. Months spent listening to wind through tall grass, flowing rivers, and distant birds have altered your sense of comfort. Crowds now seem unusual. Open landscapes feel familiar. You notice how carefully many emigrants study the town before making decisions. Some search for available farmland beyond the settlements. Others ask about employment. A few immediately purchase mining equipment before continuing toward the gold fields. Every family carries different hopes. No two futures appear identical. Historical records consistently show that California attracted remarkably diverse ambitions. While gold captured public imagination, agriculture, transportation, construction, commerce, and skilled trades all expanded rapidly during these years. Researchers from Columbia University have noted that many emigrants who never mined for gold nevertheless built successful lives supporting the rapidly growing population. Historians still debate whether these quieter successes have received enough attention compared with the dramatic stories surrounding the mines. You continue walking through the settlement. Fresh lumber perfumes the air. Carpenters work steadily beneath the warm afternoon sun, raising new buildings almost as quickly as materials arrive. Their rhythmic saws and hammers echo across the growing town. Nearby, brickmakers stack newly fired blocks beside unfinished walls. Blacksmiths shape glowing iron into horseshoes, wagon fittings, and farming tools. Every trade appears busy. Opportunity exists everywhere for those prepared to work. One merchant smiles while arranging sacks of flour outside his store, instead of searching riverbeds for gold. He sells food to hundreds of miners passing through each month. His hands remain clean, His business prospers. The lesson quietly reveals itself. California rewards more than luck. It rewards adaptability. Modern historians associated with Harvard University have frequently observed that the state's rapid economic diversification became one of the lasting consequences of the gold rush. Historians continue discussing whether commercial development eventually surpassed mining itself as the stronger force behind California's long-term prosperity. Beyond the settlement, fertile valleys stretch toward distant hills. Several families choose to leave the busy roads behind, seeking quieter lives among fields and orchards rather than crowded mining camps. You follow one such family, only for a while. Their wagon turns onto a narrow track lined with wild oak trees. Birds sing from low branches while sunlight flickers gently across the dusty road. The pace immediately changes, slower, more familiar. The father studies rich dark soil with quiet satisfaction. His wife notices a nearby stream flowing steadily across the meadow. Their children run through tall grass without the constant caution demanded by mountain trails or desert crossings. Hope feels different here, less urgent, more enduring. One elderly neighbor who settled several years earlier greets the newcomers warmly. He points toward a nearby grazing land and describes seasonal rains, successful crops, and the importance of preparing for occasional drought. His advice sounds practical, not romantic. The honesty carries its own comfort. Historical evidence suggests that many emigrants deliberately avoided the uncertainty of mining after witnessing crowded camps and unpredictable fortunes. Researchers from Yale University have noted that agriculture expanded rapidly as California's growing population demanded reliable food supplies. Historians still debate how many families originally intended to become farmers before changing their plans during the excitement of the gold rush. Late afternoon sunlight bathes the valley in warm golden colors. Vineyards shimmer gently beneath the breeze while orchards cast long shadows across cultivated fields. The land appears generous, yet it asks for patience, just as the trail did. Building a farm requires seasons rather than days. Planting trees demands faith in years not yet lived. Success comes quietly, often unnoticed by those searching only for dramatic stories. Perhaps that is fitting. The California Trail itself taught similar lessons. As evening approaches, camp forms for what may be one of the final times. The wagons stand beside a peaceful river where willow branches sway gently above the slow current. The familiar evening rituals unfold almost automatically. Bread bakes, coffee steams, firewood crackles. Yet everyone senses the approaching end of something extraordinary. One child quietly asks whether they will keep traveling tomorrow. His mother smiles gently. Not much farther. The answer hangs warmly in the evening air. You sit beside the fire watching tiny sparks drift upward toward the first stars appearing above the valley. Months ago those same stars watched you leave the Missouri frontier. Since then they have looked down upon every river crossed, every mountain climbed, every difficult mile endured. They remained constant. You did not. The journey has transformed ordinary travelers into people shaped by distance, endurance, cooperation, and quiet resilience. Tomorrow the wheels will still turn, but they will no longer carry you toward California. They will carry you within it. The first morning without urgency feels unfamiliar. Sunlight spreads slowly across fertile valleys where orchards, newly planted fields, and scattered ranches replace the endless rhythm of the overland trail. Instead of asking how many miles remain before sunset, your thoughts drift toward entirely different questions. Where should a home stand? Which field will become the first harvest? How long before unfamiliar neighbors become trusted friends? The journey has changed its purpose. Movement becomes settlement. The wagon, once the center of daily life, gradually transforms into something ordinary. Its wheels remain dusty from thousands of miles, yet they no longer carry every possession toward an uncertain horizon. One by one, blankets are removed, Wooden chests are lifted carefully onto solid ground. Cooking pots finally find places inside permanent kitchens rather than temporary camps. The unpacking feels unhurried, almost ceremonial. Each object carries a memory of the road. A dented coffee pot recalls cold mornings beside prairie rivers. A patched blanket remembers freezing nights in the Sierra Nevada. A weathered rope still smells faintly of wet leather from a difficult river crossing months earlier. Nothing seems ordinary anymore. Everything tells a story. You help raise the first rough fence around a small field. Fresh-cut pine releases a clean, sweet fragrance as each post settles into the earth. The rhythmic sound of axes echoes softly through the valley, while birds continue singing from nearby oak branches. Seemingly unconcerned by the growing settlement, the work feels familiar, yet completely different. Walking beside a wagon demanded endurance. Building a home demands patience of another kind. Every board placed today promises shelter through winters yet to come. Every seed planted carries hope beyond the present season. Researchers from the University of California have emphasized that many emigrants who completed the California Trail soon shifted their attention from survival to long-term community building. Historians broadly agree that the rapid establishment of farms, mills, schools, churches, and businesses helped transform California from a frontier region into a developing state. Even so, scholars continue debating whether this transition occurred more quickly in agricultural valleys than in areas dominated by mining activity. The valley gradually fills with quiet industry. Saw blades sing through fresh timber. Hammers strike iron nails with steady confidence. Horses pull logs toward newly marked building sites, while oxen that once crossed deserts now plough fertile soil instead. The animals seem calmer. Perhaps they sense the difference. One elderly ox pauses beside a stream after finishing the day's work. Months ago it hauled a heavily loaded wagon across rocky mountain trails. Today it stands peacefully beneath the shade of a spreading oak. Its labour measured not in miles but in furrows. The transformation feels symbolic. The road has finally released its grip. Nearby, families cooperate much as they did during the long journey west. Several neighbours gather to raise the wooden frame of a new barn. Strong hands lift heavy beams together, while others secure them with wooden pegs and iron fittings. No one works alone. The trail taught that lesson well. Many emigrants discover that the habits formed during months of shared travel remain valuable long after arrival. Borrowing tools, exchanging labour, and sharing practical knowledge continue naturally, because cooperation has already become part of daily life. One family brings fresh bread, another prepares stew. Children carry buckets of cool water from a nearby creek, proud to contribute in whatever ways they can. The meal tastes especially satisfying, not because it is elaborate, because everyone helped create it. Researchers from Harvard University have observed that frontier communities often relied upon informal networks of mutual assistance before formal institutions became established. Historians continue discussing how much of this cooperative spirit originated from trail experiences versus earlier traditions carried west from communities in the eastern United States. The afternoon passes beneath a gentle breeze carrying the scent of freshly turned earth. The soil feels rich beneath your hands, darker and softer than the dusty ground crossed only weeks earlier. Small clouds drift lazily across a brilliant blue sky, while swallows dart effortlessly above the open fields. You pause for a moment, simply to breathe. The silence feels different now. Not empty, comfortable, some distance away. A modest schoolhouse begins taking shape from freshly cut lumber. Parents gather nearby discussing books, teachers, and the education their children will receive. The conversation feels hopeful. It also feels practical. Communities cannot survive on dreams alone. They require teachers, doctors, blacksmiths, merchants, and farmers as surely as they once required wagon masters and experienced guides. Historical records consistently show that schools appeared remarkably early in many growing California settlements. Researchers from Stanford University have noted that education became a priority even in communities experiencing rapid population growth. Historians still debate whether these early schools reflected long-established cultural values or the practical recognition that stable families encouraged permanent settlement. Late in the afternoon, the settlement's small general store grows busy with customers exchanging goods, news, and advice. Shelves display flour, sugar, nails, lantern oil, fabric, and simple farming tools. Conversation fills the room, not gossip, shared experience. One newcomer asks about planting fruit trees. Another seeks advice on repairing irrigation ditches before the next dry season. A carpenter offers to help build additional houses once his current project is complete. Knowledge continues travelling. Even after the trail ends, you recognise several familiar faces from the Wagon Company. Months ago you gathered around the same campfires beneath unfamiliar stars. Now you meet beside unfinished storefronts and newly fenced fields. The friendships remain, only the setting has changed. As evening approaches, golden sunlight washes across the valley. Freshly built cabins glow warmly beneath the lowering sun. Thin columns of chimney smoke drift peacefully into the calm air, while cattle graze quietly beyond the fences. The smell of supper returns. Wood smoke, fresh bread, vegetables harvested from small gardens already beginning to flourish. The familiar aromas connect past and present in quiet harmony. One older woman unfolds the worn map that guided the caravan across half a continent. Its edges have become soft from constant handling. Small stains mark river crossings. Fold lines reveal months of careful use. She studies it silently, then folds it away. Its work is finished, not forgotten. The trail carried thousands toward California, but it never promised what they would build after arriving. That responsibility belonged entirely to the people themselves. The stars appear gradually above the peaceful valley. They shine with the same quiet brilliance that accompanied every campfire from Missouri to the Sierra Nevada. Tonight, however, no one wonders where tomorrow's campsite will be. Tomorrow begins here, at home. The new settlements grow steadily with each passing season, yet the quiet success surrounding fresh farms and busy streets can easily hide another truth. Every weathered cabin, every fenced pasture, and every thriving business stands upon months of sacrifice that seldom appear in celebratory stories. The California Trail rewards perseverance, but it always demands a price. Some costs remain visible, others never fully disappear. On a cool autumn morning, you walk beyond the edge of the settlement where the last cultivated field meets open country. Dew rests lightly upon dry grass while a thin layer of fog drifts above a narrow creek. The smell of wet earth rises gently into the crisp air, carrying with it memories of countless mornings spent breaking camp before sunrise. The memories arrive quietly, almost unexpectedly. You remember the creaking wagons, the endless dust, the long river crossings, the slow climb through mountain passes. The simple routines that once felt exhausting now appear strangely comforting from a distance. Memory softens many hardships. Not all of them. Modern historians associated with Yale University have emphasized that surviving diaries often reveal both gratitude and grief after the journey ended. Many emigrants celebrated successful arrival while quietly mourning companions, livestock, possessions, or opportunities lost along the road. Historians continue debating whether later memoirs understated these hardships, because successful settlement encouraged survivors to remember the journey through a more hopeful lens. The trail asks something different from every traveller. For some, it demanded strength. For others, patience. For many, it required letting go. You visit a small cemetery overlooking the valley. It contains only a handful of modest wooden markers. These graves belong to people who survived the journey west but not the difficult months that followed. Illness, accidents, and the challenges of frontier life continue long after the wagon wheels stop turning. The place feels peaceful, not forgotten. Fresh wildflowers rest beside one marker. Someone visited recently. No words accompany the flowers. They do not need to. The California Trail itself witnessed many burials. Historical records suggest that emigrants commonly buried loved ones beside the road, often placing graves where passing wagons might help conceal them from disturbance. These moments rarely resembled dramatic scenes described in later fiction. Instead, they were heartbreakingly quiet. The caravan paused. A service was spoken. Then the journey continued. Researchers from Harvard University have noted that disease remained one of the greatest dangers along the overland trails, particularly illnesses such as cholera during certain migration seasons. Historians broadly agree on the devastating impact of disease, although scholars continue discussing why some wagon companies suffered heavily, while others experienced remarkably few serious illnesses under seemingly similar conditions. You sit beside the creek listening to water flowing gently over smooth stones. The sound recalls another stream, then another. The trail becomes a chain of remembered rivers. You think about the countless ordinary sacrifices rarely mentioned in official reports. Shoes wore completely through before reaching California. Family heirlooms were abandoned beside difficult climbs because the wagons could carry no more. Favorite books disappeared one by one as every unnecessary pound became a burden. A piano left behind, a rocking chair abandoned, a chest of silver buried beneath prairie grass. Each object represented a difficult decision. None could outweigh survival. One elderly neighbor quietly tells you about a family Bible that slipped into a swollen river during an unexpected crossing. The book had belonged to 4 generations before disappearing beneath muddy water in only a few seconds. He still remembers the moment, decades later, not because of the book alone, because of everything it represented. Historical letters repeatedly remind modern readers that emotional loss often accompanied material loss. Researchers from Columbia University have observed that emigrants frequently mourned possessions connected to family history more deeply than valuable items carrying only financial worth. Historians still debate how much these private emotional experiences influence decisions made after settlement, since many surviving letters hint at feelings never fully explained. The afternoon brings warm sunshine across the valley. Children laugh nearby. Life continues. That simple truth carries extraordinary weight. The new generation runs through orchards without remembering deserts, mountain storms, or weeks spent walking beside slow-moving wagons. Their memories begin here rather than along the trail. Perhaps that is exactly what their parents hoped. Success often means sparing others from hardship. You watch one father repairing a fence while his young daughter gathers fallen apples into a woven basket. She asks whether he always lived in California. He smiles softly. No. Then he returns to his work. The answer is truthful, yet incomplete. Some experiences resist easy explanation. Researchers from Stanford University have noted that many pioneer families spoke surprisingly little about the most difficult moments of westward migration. Historians continue discussing whether this silence reflected emotional resilience, painful memory, or the simple desire to focus upon the future rather than the past. Late in the afternoon, gentle rain begins falling across the valley. Not a storm, just steady autumn rain. The smell of wet wood rises from nearby barns. Freshly ploughed fields darken beneath the moisture while drops collect along orchard branches before falling quietly to the ground. You stand beneath a porch roof, listening. Rain once meant muddy trails, swollen rivers, and delayed travel. Now it promises healthy crops. Perspective changes everything. One older woman carefully unfolds a faded journal kept throughout the journey west. Its pages have yellowed slightly, and the ink appears lighter than when first written. She reads only a few paragraphs, then closes it again. The memories remain powerful enough. Historical evidence suggests that many emigrants preserved journals, letters, and maps long after settlement. because they understood the extraordinary nature of what they had experienced. Researchers from the University of Chicago have emphasized that these personal records now provide some of the richest surviving evidence about everyday life along the California Trail. Historians still debate how representative these preserved documents remain, since countless other stories disappeared without written record. Evening arrives quietly. The rain ends. Mist rises gently above the fields while wood smoke drifts from stone chimneys into the cool twilight. Supper tastes especially comforting tonight. Fresh vegetables, warm bread, and thick soup replace the simpler meals once prepared beside temporary campfires. Comfort feels earned, not accidental. You sit beside the fire watching flames dance across polished iron cookware no longer packed away each morning. The familiar crackling sound reminds you of countless evenings beneath open skies, where tomorrow always meant another difficult mile. Now tomorrow means tending fields, repairing fences, helping neighbours, watching children grow. The trail may have ended, its lessons remain. Patience, cooperation, quiet endurance. These become lasting companions long after the final wagon reaches California. Outside, stars slowly emerge above the peaceful valley. They witnessed every step of the journey. Tonight they shine upon a place no longer called a destination. It has finally become home. Another spring arrives quietly across the valleys of California. Wildflowers bloom beneath spreading oak trees while clear streams carry fresh snowmelt from the distant Sierra Nevada. Morning sunlight settles gently across fields that only months earlier existed as untouched grassland. The air smells of damp earth, blossoming orchards, and bread baking inside homes that once existed only as hopeful sketches in worn notebooks. Life feels settled now, yet the trail remains close. You discover that memories of the journey return unexpectedly during ordinary moments. The creak of a wagon carrying harvested grain sounds remarkably similar to the wagons that crossed the Great Plains. The smell of wood smoke drifting from a chimney recalls evenings beside prairie rivers. Even the sight of children running through tall grass awakens memories of young travelers who somehow found endless energy after walking 20 miles in a single day. Time moves forward. Memory walks beside it. Among the thousands who traveled the California Trail, women and children experience the journey in ways both similar to and different from the men often placed at the center of popular stories. The Great Migration was not only an expedition of explorers or fortune seekers, it was also a movement of entire families carrying hopes that stretched far beyond one generation. Their stories deserve quiet attention. They always have. Researchers from Harvard University have emphasized that women's diaries provide some of the richest surviving descriptions of daily life along the overland trails. Historians broadly agree that these journals reveal details often absent from official reports, particularly concerning family routines, health, food preparation, childcare, and emotional resilience. At the same time, scholars continue debating how representative the surviving accounts remain because literacy and journal keeping varied widely among emigrant families. Your thoughts return to a familiar morning on the prairie. Before sunrise, before breakfast, before the wagons began rolling, one mother quietly stitched another patch onto a child's worn trousers while balancing a sleeping infant beside her. Nearby, another woman carefully measured flour for the day's bread, already calculating how many weeks remained before reaching California. The work never stopped. Neither did her patience. The California Trail demanded constant labor from nearly every adult. Women cooked over open fires despite changing weather and limited ingredients. They washed clothing in icy streams, cared for sick family members, repaired worn garments, collected fuel, organized supplies, and somehow created a sense of home beneath canvas wagon covers. These tasks rarely appeared heroic. They were essential. Without them, the journey could not continue. Historical records repeatedly demonstrate that domestic responsibilities remained central even under frontier conditions. Researchers from Yale University have noted that emigrant women frequently adapted familiar household routines to environments offering few comforts and constant uncertainty. Historians still discuss how these practical contributions have sometimes received less attention than more dramatic accounts of exploration or conflict. Children carried responsibilities too, often greater than modern readers might expect. Young boys helped guide livestock, gathered water, collected fuel, and watched grazing animals during evening camps. Girls frequently assisted with cooking, washing younger siblings, and countless small chores that kept each wagon functioning smoothly. Work became education. The trail itself became a classroom. Yet childhood never disappeared completely. One little boy pauses beside a prairie stream to chase bright green frogs before reluctantly returning to his chores. A group of girls weave crowns from wildflowers during the midday halt. Older children invent games using smooth stones, sticks, and endless imagination while adults prepare the evening meal. Joy survives remarkably well, even under difficult conditions. You remember hearing laughter across the camps far more often than expected. Perhaps that surprises you now. It surprised many travellers then. Modern historians associated with Stanford University have observed that family journals often balance descriptions of hardship with moments of ordinary happiness. Historians continue debating whether these cheerful passages reflected emotional resilience, or whether parents intentionally emphasized positive experiences when writing for relatives who might someday read their journals. The truth may include both. Human lives often do. A cool breeze moves gently through the orchard surrounding your new home. Blossoms drift slowly from the branches, covering the grass with delicate white petals. The scene reminds you of another day, a windy afternoon upon the Great Plains. Then, instead of blossoms, thousands of cottonwood seeds floated through the air like tiny clouds, delighting children despite the long miles still ahead. Memory connects distant places, sometimes with surprising tenderness. One elderly woman in the settlement gathers neighborhood children beneath the shade of a broad oak tree. She begins telling stories about the journey west. Not dramatic stories, small ones. She remembers the family dog that insisted upon sleeping beneath the same wagon every night. She remembers teaching children to recognize meadowlark songs. She remembers baking bread beside a river while curious buffalo watched from the distant prairie. The children listen carefully. They ask endless questions. Not about gold, not about danger, about the people. The ordinary moments prove surprisingly fascinating. Researchers from the University of Chicago have noted that oral family traditions often preserved aspects of westward migration, absent from written records. Historians still debate how memory changes these stories across generations. Yet many family accounts align remarkably well with surviving diaries and letters. Late in the afternoon, several families gather for a community meal celebrating the completion of another successful planting season. Long wooden tables stand beneath spreading trees while fresh vegetables, roasted meat, warm bread, fruit preserves, and homemade pies fill every available space. The meal feels abundant, almost impossible to imagine during the early weeks of the trail. Children race through the grass while older neighbors exchange stories about improving harvests and newly completed schools. One grandmother quietly watches them all. Her smile says enough. She crossed a continent so these children might never have to. The thought lingers gently. It deserves time. Historical evidence consistently suggests that many emigrant families viewed westward migration as an investment in future generations, rather than merely an individual adventure. Researchers from Princeton University have emphasized that letters home often described hopes for children's futures more frequently than personal ambitions. Historians continue discussing how strongly these family motivations influenced migration compared with economic opportunity alone. As evening approaches, lanterns glow warmly beneath the branches of old oak trees. Gentle conversation replaces the busy sounds of the day, while crickets begin singing from nearby fields. You notice something beautiful. Nobody measures miles anymore. Instead, people speak of seasons, harvests, schools, neighbours. Tomorrow's work concerns orchards instead of river crossings. The transformation feels complete, yet every peaceful evening still carries echoes of the trail, the patience learned beside slow-moving wagons, the cooperation forged around distant campfires, the quiet courage displayed by mothers, fathers, grandparents, and children alike. Their footsteps no longer cross the prairie. They continue through the lives they built. The stars rise slowly above California once again, exactly as they did above Missouri, the Great Plains, South Pass, the deserts, and the Sierra Nevada. The sky remembers every traveler. Tonight, it shines especially brightly upon the families who carried the future west. Years begin passing more quickly than the long months ever seem to pass upon the trail. Seasons replace milestones. Harvest replace daily mileage. The wagon that once carried every possession now spends more time transporting timber, grain, and neighbours than crossing unknown country. Life settles into a reassuring rhythm shaped by sunrise, honest work, and familiar faces. Yet the West refuses to remain still. It continues changing. Each spring brings another stream of newcomers. Fresh wagons arrive carrying hopeful families much like yours once did. Their canvas covers are stained by prairie dust. Their oxen move with the same patient determination. Their children look toward California with the same mixture of excitement and uncertainty that once filled your own heart. The trail remains alive, but it is evolving. The California Trail has never been a fixed road. Each passing season alters its appearance. Deep wagon ruts become more pronounced in some places, while grass quietly reclaims abandoned stretches elsewhere. River crossings shift after heavy floods. Campsites expand or disappear according to changing patterns of travel. The landscape remembers, even when people forget. Researchers from the University of California have observed that overland migration reached its greatest intensity during the gold rush years before gradually declining during the 1860s. Historians broadly agree that changing transportation networks transformed travel across the American West. Even so, scholars continue debating exactly how rapidly wagon migration diminished because regional differences remained significant for many years. You notice those changes during occasional trips back toward the eastern valleys. Certain sections of the old trail feel almost familiar enough to navigate without maps. Others appear remarkably different. Small trading posts have become towns. Simple ferries have become stronger crossings. Blacksmith shops multiply wherever travelers gather. Progress leaves visible marks. One autumn afternoon, you visit a roadside inn serving emigrants still making the long journey west. The building stands beside a route that once offered little more than open prairie and temporary camps. The common room feels lively. Stories fill every corner. Fresh arrivals ask questions that sound wonderfully familiar. How many miles remain? Which rivers run high this season? How early will snow reach the Sierra? You smile quietly. You once asked those same questions. Across the room sits an older wagon master who has completed the overland journey several times. His weathered hands rest comfortably round a warm cup of coffee, while younger travellers eagerly absorb every practical word he offers. He speaks calmly, without exaggeration. The trail rewards preparation. It punishes hurry. Take care of your animals. His advice carries the weight of experience rather than drama. Historical journals repeatedly show that experienced emigrants became valuable sources of practical knowledge for later travellers. Researchers from Columbia University have noted that informal networks of shared information often proved as important as published guidebooks. Historians continue debating whether personal advice influenced emigrant decisions more strongly than widely circulated printed manuals. Outside, another remarkable change appears. Telegraph poles. They stretch across portions of the landscape where only a few years earlier messages travelled no faster than horses or wagons. Thin wires hum softly in the afternoon breeze. The sound feels almost mysterious. Communication itself has begun changing. News that once required months to cross the continent can now travel in days, and eventually even faster. Rumours spread differently. Markets respond more quickly. Families separated by great distances gain new ways to remain connected. Distance still exists. Its meaning begins changing. The stagecoach also becomes an increasingly familiar sight along important western routes. Unlike the slow emigrant wagons carrying entire households, these coaches move with remarkable speed, carrying passengers, mail, and valuable cargo between growing communities. Dust rises behind them, then quickly settles. You watch one coach disappear over a distant ridge. Its pace seems astonishing compared with the steady movement of the old wagon caravans. Researchers from Stanford University have emphasized that improvements in transportation gradually reshape the American West during the 1850s and 1860s. Historians broadly agree that stagecoach routes and telegraph lines strengthened economic and political connections across the expanding nation. Historians still discuss how these innovations altered everyday frontier life at different speeds depending upon local geography and settlement patterns. The greatest transformation, however, still waits. It approaches quietly. Surveyors begin appearing with unfamiliar instruments carried carefully across hills and valleys. Engineers study mountain passes, river crossings, and long stretches of open country with remarkable attention. Many people wonder why. Soon the answer becomes clear. Railroads. The possibility seems almost unbelievable at first. A railway crossing the continent. An iron road replacing months of difficult travel. Some greet the idea with excitement, others with skepticism. You remember the immense plains, the deserts, and the Sierra Nevada. Building tracks across such country appears nearly impossible, yet impossible things have happened before. The California Trail itself once seemed impossible. Historical records clearly show that discussion of a transcontinental railroad intensified during these years. Researchers from Princeton University have noted that political leaders, engineers, merchants, and settlers recognized its enormous potential long before construction reached completion. Historians continue debating whether economic necessity or national unity provided the stronger motivation behind this ambitious project. As evening approaches, you walk along a quiet stretch of the old trail not far from your home. Deep wagon ruts remain visible beneath long grass. Weather has softened their edges, yet they still mark the passage of thousands upon thousands of wheels. You kneel beside them, running your hand gently through the shallow groove. The earth feels cool, firm, silent. How many families passed this very place? How many hopes travelled west within those wagons? No exact answer survives. Only the marks remain. Nearby, wildflowers bloom peacefully where exhausted oxen once grazed after another difficult day. Birds sing from fence posts overlooking fields that didn't exist when the first emigrants crossed this valley. The land heals quietly. History leaves gentle traces. Night begins settling across California. Warm lantern light shines from farmhouse windows while distant laughter drifts across freshly harvested fields. Somewhere beyond the hills, another emigrant caravan prepares supper beside a familiar campfire. Still following the road that shaped so many lives, the trail continues, though not forever. Its greatest chapter is slowly drawing toward a close as new technologies reshape the meaning of travel itself. The stars emerge one by one above the valley. They watch the first wagons arrive. Soon they will watch something entirely different. An iron road is coming, and with it, the California Trail will begin passing from living experience into history. The sound arrives long before the train itself becomes visible. A distant whistle drifts across the valley, carried by the cool morning breeze that once guided wagon smoke above countless campsites. It echoes gently against the surrounding hills before fading into silence. The people working nearby pause almost instinctively. Everyone listens. The future has a voice now. The year is 1869, a promontory summit in the Utah Territory. The completion of the first transcontinental railroad joins the rail stretching east and west across the continent. The symbolic driving of the Golden Spike marks far more than an engineering achievement. It quietly announces the end of an era shaped by months of overland wagon travel. The continent feels smaller. History turns another page. For those who once walked beside slow-moving oxen across the California Trail, the change seems almost impossible to comprehend. A journey that demanded 4 to 6 exhausting months can now be completed in little more than a week under favourable conditions. Time itself has changed. Distance has changed with it. Researchers from Stanford University have emphasized that the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad fundamentally transformed transportation, commerce, migration, and communication across the United States. Historians broadly agree that 1869 marks one of the defining turning points in the history of the American West. Even so, scholars continue debating how rapidly the railroad replaced older migration routes because wagons remained necessary in many regions lacking direct rail connections. You stand beside the familiar wagon resting beneath an old oak tree. Its wheels no longer bear fresh scars from mountain rocks. Its canvas has long since been folded away. The wood has darkened with age. You run your hand along its weathered side. The rough surface feels warm beneath the afternoon sun. This simple vehicle once carried your entire world. Now it rests quietly beside a permanent home. Its journey has ended. Its story has not. Across California, communities continue growing upon foundations established by those long wagon migrations. Roads improve, bridges replace dangerous river crossings. Schools educate children born long after the first emigrant companies arrived. Farms expand into productive valleys. Ports connect California to global commerce. The wilderness changes. So do the people living within it. You visit a nearby town where several generations now walk the same streets together. Elderly pioneers who remember every mile of the trail sit comfortably outside general stores, watching young children play beneath newly planted shade trees. The children ask curious questions. What was the trail like? Were there really buffalo? Did you cross the mountains? The answers always begin quietly, sometimes with a smile, sometimes with a thoughtful pause. Memory deserves careful handling. Historical records reveal that pioneer reunions became increasingly common during the late 19th century. Researchers from Harvard University have noted that surviving emigrants often gathered to exchange memories and preserve personal accounts before those experiences faded from living memory. Historians continue discussing how nostalgia shaped these later recollections because memory naturally emphasizes certain moments while gently softening others. One elderly woman opens the same journal she carried across the continent nearly 3 decades earlier. Its pages have grown fragile. The ink has faded slightly, yet every line remains legible. She reads aloud a brief description of crossing the Platte River. A child listening nearby interrupts with surprise. "You walked all that way." The woman laughs softly. "Almost every mile." The child looks toward the quiet wagon outside, perhaps imagining the distance, perhaps not fully able to. Some experiences resist measurement. Modern historians associated with the University of Chicago have observed that personal journals remain among the most valuable historical sources for understanding everyday life on the California Trail. Official government reports recorded distances, weather, and logistics. Personal diaries preserved emotions, relationships, disappointments, humor, and quiet acts of kindness that statistics alone could never capture. Historians still debate how fully any collection of surviving diaries represents the diversity of experiences because many voices left no written record. The afternoon breeze carries the scent of ripe apples from nearby orchards. Harvest season has returned once again. Farm wagons loaded with fruit travel roads once carved by emigrant wheels. The pace feels slower than the railroad, yet somehow fitting. Not every journey demands speed. Some require presence. You walk toward a low hill overlooking the valley where your family first settled after completing the trail. From this quiet place, the transformation becomes astonishingly clear. Fields stretch across land once covered by untouched grass. Church steeples rise where temporary camps once stood. Children attend schools where only campfires once glowed. Commerce flourishes where lonely wagon tracks once disappeared into the distance. History has become landscape. The changes reach beyond buildings alone. The California Trail reshaped the economy of the American West. It encouraged agricultural development, accelerated communication between distant regions, strengthened commercial networks, and contributed to California's emergence as an important state within the growing nation. Researchers from Princeton University have emphasized that overland migration influenced settlement patterns for generations beyond the trail's busiest years. Historians broadly agree on this lasting impact, although scholars continue discussing how the combined effects of migration, mining, agriculture, railroads, and government policy interacted to produce California's extraordinary growth. The evening light softens across the valley. Long shadows stretch between orchards and barns. You hear distant laughter carried gently through the cooling air. The sound reminds you of another evening. Children playing beside wagons, coffee simmering over open fires, the steady breathing of tired oxen after another day's travel. Memory folds time together. The years seem remarkably close. One by one, lanterns begin glowing inside farmhouse windows. Thin columns of chimney smoke rise peacefully into the twilight, carrying the familiar scent of burning oak across the valley. The smell has never changed. It still reminds you of camp. You realize something quietly profound. The California Trail was never simply about reaching a destination. It was about transformation. A continent transformed, communities transformed, families transformed, ordinary people transformed. The road shaped those who walked it. Even long after the walking ended, the first stars begin appearing overhead. They are the same stars that watched every departure from Missouri, every crossing of the Platte, every climb through South Pass, every difficult desert mile, every snowy summit in the Sierra Nevada, and every joyful arrival in California. The sky remembers. Perhaps it always will. Tomorrow, only one final chapter remains. Not about endings, about the quiet echoes that continue long after the last wagon has passed. The valley awakens beneath another peaceful sunrise. Golden light spreads slowly across orchards heavy with fruit, weathered barns standing confidently against the passing years, and quiet farmhouses built by hands that once gripped wagon reins through deserts, rivers, and mountain passes. A gentle breeze moves through tall grass growing beside faint wagon ruts that have softened beneath decades of rain and sunshine. The trail has grown quiet. It has not disappeared. You begin walking along one of those old wagon tracks. Grass now fills much of the worn depression where thousands of wooden wheels once rolled westward. Wildflowers bloom where exhausted oxen once rested. Songbirds perch upon fence posts overlooking land that generations earlier offered little more than open prairie and uncertain promise. Nature has reclaimed much. Memory preserves the rest. Every step reminds you that history rarely vanishes. Instead, it settles gently into the landscape, waiting patiently for someone willing to notice. The California Trail survives not only in museums, maps, or preserved wagon wheels, but in valleys transformed into thriving communities, in family stories passed from grandparents to grandchildren, and in the quiet determination that shaped the American West. Researchers from the University of California have emphasized that physical traces of the California Trail still survive across large portions of the western United States, despite changing roads and expanding communities. Historians broadly agree that preserving these landscapes provides an important connection